Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco back again. Another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Devouring Mirror, written by H.K. Reyes. Remember, these are links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. Oh, that one is very special, said the old man running the antique shop. Emily looked up from her phone to see a large Baroque mirror with a gilded frame of carved flowers. The late afternoon sunlight that shone through the storefront glittered over the frame, making the flowers appear to throb and writhe on the wall. The spotless circle of glass reflected Emily's body back to her. Wispy black hair, round, pensive face, baggy blue sweatshirt, feathered bare jeans with holes near the pockets. Her nose twitched at how ridiculous she looked, encircled in flowers on this tacky thing. "Oh, it's perfect, isn't it, Em?" her mother said. Emily said nothing. She refreshed her feed on her phone and scrolled down to the picture she had posted some hours ago. A carefully edited selfie with her acne digitally removed and her cheeks and chin warped to appear slimmer. No likes and no comments still. "Oh, it'll look wonderful in your room. Brighten things up in there a bit. I've been trying to redecorate and improve the ambiance in there. You know how teenagers get, doom and gloom, even when they don't have anything serious to complain about." The old man's smile was warm, and his faintly yellow teeth gleamed behind his thin gray lips. "Oh, I think the world can be a harsh place for a young person today." "Oh, to hear this one tell it, you'd think she'd suffered as much as Mother Teresa." She tilted her head back and let out a high, rolling laugh. A laugh that Emily knew well. It meant that her mother was only kidding, and that anyone who took offense to her words was simply too sensitive. Emily's phone buzzed. A cute boy from her French class had left a comment on her photo. She swiped it open excitedly, but her shoulders slumped when she saw that it was just a pig emoji. "You know, Smir has quite a history. Belonged to a wealthy Romanian gentleman in the 18th century who cherished it above all his possessions. Even as his fortune dwindled to nothing, he refused to sell it. He is said to have spent hours sitting before the glass, contemplating its depths. Apparently, he developed some rather curious beliefs with regard to the mirror. He was convinced it had been enchanted with great power." Emily smirked, but when she looked up from her phone, she saw the old man was entirely serious. According to his letters, he believed that he could see things within the mirror, more than simply his reflection. He was convinced the mirror could fulfill certain desires of his. The mother opened her purse. "Well, no need to worry about that. Emily fulfills her desires enough as it is." She patted Emily's round belly, hidden in the folds of the sweatshirt. Emily swatted her away with an annoyed grunt. The mother laughed again and fished for her wallet in her purse. Emily moved away from the counter, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She turned to glare at the back of her mother's head, but an odd feeling of unease floated through her. Her gaze drifted toward the mirror. Her conscious mind grasped for an explanation as to why she felt so anxious all of a sudden. But all it could come up with was the absurd notion that whenever she looked away from the mirror, her reflection would look away just a bit more slowly, like it was trying to stare at her for a moment longer. "Don't you think 2 servings is enough already, Em?" her mother called from down the hall. Emily pulled the door shut to her room and slumped into her creaking desk chair. She set down her dinner plate with a heavy glass clunk. She glared at herself in the ugly mirror that was now hanging over her desk. No, she thought to herself, not tonight. She opened her laptop and played a video, trying to ignore the cold, aching pressure gathering in her chest. 2 servings is enough. I'm not even hungry anymore. It should be enough, isn't it? She glared at the plate of uncooked spaghetti with its sticky coating of cold tomato sauce. Not even any good, she thought. Gross. I hate it. I don't want it. But the cold, oppressive pain pressed down on her chest, pressed until it seemed to suck the air right out of her lungs. She slammed her laptop shut, snatched the plate, and shoved pasta in her mouth. She tasted nothing, eating only for the temporary relief it brought from the pain. Even then, food was hardly relief at all. Just a single stone removed from a great heap under which she had been buried. She set the bowl down and pressed her palms into her eyes. A few tears leaked out, but she held her breath, stifling the urge to sob. She didn't need her mother bursting in to lecture her on how good her life was. You're pathetic, she thought to herself. Pathetic and fat and ugly, awful. She lifted her head to say those words out loud. She saw that her reflection was smiling at her. She gasped. Terror flashed through her, and her legs became slabs of frozen iron. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. The reflection touched his finger to its lips. Its smile held no malice, no hostility. Kindness and warmth radiated from his deep brown eyes, which, unlike Emily's, had a slight reddish tinge to them and made them seem brighter and more lively than her own. Emily felt her fear leave it in a slow pace. She raised her hand, its fingers barely peeking from the sleeve of her sweatshirt, and she waved. The reflection girl giggled silently and waved back. Emily swallowed to moisten her throat. What are you? The reflection brought its hand to its chin in a cartoonish show of thinking. It shrugged and giggled. What do you want? The reflection licked its lips and rubbed its belly. You're hungry? It nodded emphatically. Well, I have some food here. Do you want that? The girl in the mirror nodded eagerly. It reached out with both hands for the plate of pasta on its side of the mirror. Ignoring the fork, it scooped up a big handful, opened its mouth much wider than Emily could, and ate it. Emily's plate didn't move, but the portion that I'd been eating disappeared in a puff of purplish smoke. Emily watched, eyes white-rimmed and shining with amazement, as the food vanished from her plate with the girl's every bite. Before long, the reflection had finished the meal, and Emily's plate was empty, save for a slick purple residue on the surface. The reflection leaned back, patted its belly with its sauce-covered hands, and belched silently. Emily stared at the empty plate on her desk. It's gone. It's gone, and I feel full? No, that's not quite right. Physically, she could tell she hadn't eaten anything, but she had tasted every bite the reflection had taken, and there was a profound sense of satisfaction in her heart, as though some spiritual appetite within her had been sated, even if her body had not. The reflection leaned forward and with a hand dripping in sauce, wrote on the glass, "More." Emily jumped from her seat and ran to the kitchen. Her mother called down the hallway, "Dessert too? Em, you're never gonna meet any boys unless you start taking better care of your..." Emily slammed her door and dumped an armful of candy, chips, and ice cream on her desk. The reflection ate ferociously, ripping packages open with its teeth, shoveling sweets and snacks to its gaping mouth by the fistful. By midnight, both Emily and her reflection were slumped over, exhausted on their desks. The reflection's belly, now round and distended, rose and fell with every labored breath. Emily felt full to bursting, even as her stomach growled. That was amazing. It was like eating, but not eating. I don't have to feel bad about it. The reflection laughed. Potato chip flecks splattered against the inside of the glass. She lifted her finger and wrote in a smear of grease and melted ice cream, "I will eat for you, so you become beautiful." Why are you being so nice to me? She writes, "Because you, same." Emily slept soundly that night, feeling that life was about to become very different. Night after night, Emily brought her dinner to her room and watched her reflection devour it all. She would pile her plate with as much as it could hold, and the girl in the mirror would eat and eat till its belly looked ready to split open. Yet, it never seemed to be satisfied. Every night, with a hand coated in sauce or grease, it would write in the mirror, "More." And every night, Emily would feed it again. No longer desiring food for herself, Emily began to lose weight. The roundness in her face pulled inward like a blueberry shriveling in the sun. Her waist shrank, her limbs became long, thin poles, and her fingers were as spindly as spider legs. Where she once dreaded stepping on the scale, now she looked forward to it as it was her favorite part of the day. She bought one for her room and placed it right in front of the mirror so she could track the dwindling number and celebrate milestones with her reflection. He ditched the hoodies and baggy t-shirts for slim dresses, fitted jeans, and crop tops. The boys who had ignored or mocked her since childhood began to take notice. They flirted with her, or tried to, in their clumsy and awkward way. She could sense how nervous they were when they spoke to her, how eager, yelping for her attention like puppies. She could sense the power she had over them, and she liked it. Not all the attention was pleasant. Some of the girls became rude and nasty, especially the ones whose boyfriends cast glances in her direction. They spread wild, obscene rumors. "That whore," they would say. "Do you hear what she did with Mr. Blackwell in the equipment room behind the gym? It's true, Stella saw everything." Sometimes the girls were so mean that Emily would race home to cry at her desk. Her reflection, by now enormously fat, would fog up the mirror with its breath, and write in the thick, stubby finger, "Just jealous." Yes, jealous. Emily knew it was only jealousy that motivated the cruelty of the other girls. They said it had been jealousy that drove Mrs. Cobb to hold her back after biology class one day. "I'm very concerned for your health," she had said. "Poor nutrition can have serious consequences for your body. Look, I want you to know that you're not alone. I'm here to support you and help you find healthy ways to blah, blah, blah." Emily had rolled her eyes and walked out. Some nights, as the mirror girl was chomping down on its food, a pang of true hunger would strike Emily like a bullet. She would feel the urge to eat something real. But whenever she reached for a bite, the mirror girl would nip at its own finger, and Emily would feel it. Yes, she's right. She wouldn't let me make bad decisions. She is me, after all. Emily sat across from her mother at the dinner table. A steamy plate of gooey casserole sat untouched in front of her. "May I be excused?" Her mother set her napkin on her lap and said, "Em, when I said I wanted to eat together, it wasn't because I like watching you sulk. Eat something." Emily huffed, gathered up a cheesy bite, and stuck it in her mouth. She pushed the food into her cheek, where it could be stored and spat out later. "There, can I be excused now?" Her mother set her fork on her plate and clasped her hands together. "Your teacher phoned me today to express concerns for your health," as she put it. "She said she's worried I haven't been feeding you enough. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was for me?" Emily pushed her plate away and took out her phone. No phones at the table, but Emily ignored her. Her feed was glittering with notifications for her latest photo, a selfie in a tight pink dress. "People talk, you know. I'm sure your teacher's talking already. Oh, they all pretend to be concerned about this and that, but in reality, they're judging you, laughing at you. That trashy family, they're saying. Look what a mess they are, too poor to even afford food. Emily scrolled through her photos, basking in the likes and shares. A notification popped into view, and she saw that the cute boy from her French class had commented on her selfie. Look, I'm just looking out for you, Em. I know you've been improving yourself, and that's admirable, but I don't want you to go as far as you ended up looking bad. You might end up making us look bad. Emily smiled, and she opened the notification, but her face fell when she saw that the boy had only commented with a skeleton emoji. Look, I just want you to be happy, Em. Emily looked up at her mother's arrogant, pitying smile, and something in her cracked. Stop calling me Em. My name is Emily. The outburst shocked them both. A charged silence gripped the room. The air itself seemed to become thin and cold, like pressure dropping before a storm. The mother's hands fell slowly to the table. I named you. You wouldn't even have a name if it weren't for me. I can call you whatever I want. Emily's heart raced. Her hands felt cold, like she couldn't get enough blood into them. You always do what you want. You never care about what I want. You don't even ask. I don't ask because I don't want to get any useful information. What would you say if I asked what you want? To sulk around in your room all day and with your face buried in your phone? To yell at me just because I'm trying to do what's best for us? Rage and fear churned Emily's blood. Her hands gripped at the table. You're not looking out for us. You're only looking out for you. I'm not stupid. Even if you think I am, you couldn't care less about me. Her mother tilted her head back and laughed. Oh, yes, and that's why I spent hundreds of dollars on an antique mirror for your room. That's why I spent so much money on all those nice new clothes you wanted. That's why I wasted an hour of my time to make dinner for you tonight, even after I've been working since 6 o'clock this morning. Emily slammed her fist on the table. You're the reason I hate food. You made me feel bad about everything I've ever eaten. I thought if I got skinny, you would be nice to me. But now you're worse than ever. Oh, so you're angry I made a few jokes. I knew you were oversensitive, but this takes the cake. No, I'm angry you treat me like dirt because you're jealous. You're jealous that I look good, and you just look like the awful old bitch you are. Her mother drew back, like she'd been struck. Emily knew at once she had crossed the line. A great gust of fear swirled through her. She felt dizzy and lightheaded. Her mother then stood from her seat. Why on earth would I be jealous of a miserable, sniveling little brat like you? You think you're hot stuff now, but I know what you really are inside. You'll always be a fat, weak little pig, no matter what you look like. The words scorched Emily to the soul, and she ran out of the room. She slammed her door shut and collapsed into a loud, racking sobs. Pain gathered in her chest, the dull pressure she knew so well. This time, it was accompanied by a feeling of tightness, like a great constricting snake had coiled around her heart. She lifted her head and squinted through the tears in the mirror. Her reflection was staring back at her in confusion, sympathy. Its jowly cheeks sagging, its hair shining with grease, its rolls of body fat shuddering with every movement. This is really what I am, she thought. This is what I'll always be. The reflection wrote with its oily finger. What wrong? Just leave me alone. The girl kept writing. Her? Mother? She hates me. And she's right too. I'm disgusting. The reflection wrote, I can help. What could you do to help me? It wrote, hungry. I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure dinner's ruined for tonight. The reflection shook its head. No, not usual dinner. What do you want then? A soft knock at the door startled her. Her mother's voice came through softly. Em? Can we talk? Em turned toward the reflection to tell her to wait, but the words written on the glass stopped her cold. Hungry for meat. The door opened and the mother stood in the doorway. Daylight was fading quickly and shadow had pulled into the depressions around her eyes. Oh, Em, I'm very sorry. We sort of let things get out of hand there, didn't we? Emily stood up with difficulty. Her heart felt like it was sputtering in her chest, like a motor running out of fuel. She leaned against the desk for support and saw that something had changed in the reflection's face. No, not a face anymore. Not exactly. It was something else. The mother stepped into the room, her white skirt undiluted, shadow as she moved. I shouldn't have said that just now. It was a terrible thing to say. I have no excuse. To be honest, I was just shocked by how much you sounded like me at your age. Emily gazed into the reflection's eyes. Eyes that no longer resembled her own. Eyes that became warm pools of crimson red above a grinning, toothed maw. And she understood. In fact, I'm pretty sure I said the same thing to your grandmother just before I left home. It's funny how these things work out. I'd swore I'd never be anything like her. I bet you told yourself the same thing. Truth washed over Emily like a cold, cleansing rain. Yes, she understood now. She had been hungry all her life, but not for food. No. She had eaten to ease the pain of living. All she had needed was one particular bite. You know, I tried to make things different for you. Got us a home, so you would never know what it's like living out in a car. Bought us nice things, so you wouldn't have to be embarrassed about bringing anyone over. It was all so obvious. Emily wondered how she had never seen it before. No matter. She knew what had to be done now. That was enough. She touched her hand to the mirror, and through the glass felt the reflection's scaly claw on the other side. Look, I tried to avoid the old trap, but it seems like I just found another way to fall into it. The mirror thing pulled away, and on its side of the glass crept up behind the mother. Its teeth glinted like broken glass as its lipless mouth pulled open. I guess what your grandmother just said before she died is true. You don't face your demons, you end up feeding them. The creature arched like a cobra and struck, sinking its teeth into the woman's throat. The mother's head snapped back, and she was thrown backward against the wall. Her fingers shot to her neck, grasping at the invisible force that had suddenly constricted around her windpipe. Blood vessels burst in her eyes, coloring the whites a bright scarlet. She tried to scream, but could only squirt a wet gurgle from her crushed throat. The skin of her throat puckered and split in a jagged, bleeding line. The mirror creature wrenched its head back, and the flesh vanished in a puff of purple smoke. Blood gushed from the open wound. It sucked into her windpipe as she struggled to breathe, came up again, pink and frothy. Emily tasted her mother's throat exploding into her mouth. Blood pumped over her tongue like juice from a ripe tomato. The reflection chewed, and Emily tasted the soft, yielding meat. She threw her head back and laughed, a wild, gleeful sound that was halfway to screaming. As her mother reached out for her and mouthed, "Help." Emily leaned down and laughed in her face. "What's the matter, Mom? It was just a joke. You're not too sensitive now, are you?" Emily's heartbeat was wild, regular. The tightness in her chest exploded to a blazing white fire. She was still laughing, savoring the blood and meat, when her legs gave out from under her and she was swallowed in the darkness. Later that night, the old man at the antique shop noticed with a mild surprise that the mirror had returned to its usual spot on the wall. "Oh my, you've come home early." He placed both hands on the frame and leaned his face towards the glass, as though he were dunking his head to a barrel of black water. "Oh, I see. Well, that woman was awful. Serves her right. Pity about the young girl, though. But not unexpected, given how weak her heart must have been at that level of undernourishment." He let go of the mirror and shuffled back behind the shop counter. Darkness pressed in on him, and he wore it like a slithering robe. Not even moonlight touched him. Still, it seems that everyone got what they wanted. All in all, a successful sale, I'd say. No time to rest on our laurels, gentlemen. Another customer might arrive at any minute. His teeth were a pale yellow crescent as he sat behind his counter and smiled in the dark. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Ceresco back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled Untold Tales of Horror, Now Told, written by Dale Thompson. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. devilish dolls, haunted houses, ghoulish ghosts, freaky frights, dreadful demons, blood-sucking bats, peculiar pumpkins, bizarre bridges, fiendish phantoms, atrocious apparitions, malfeasant monsters, wicked witches, and all things that go bump in the night. Welcome to Untold Tales of Horror Now Told. I am your host, Alistair Mortimer Caneswright. Tonight, we will tell the tales that no one is brave enough to tell. If you believe in the University Halloween Massacre, or that perhaps there are secret tunnels running below your university that house the dead, the ghosts of suicide victims hanging in your university hallways, or that stone statues come alive at night to eat students, then this program is for you. Alistair ran through his podcast within his normal time and with a grand send-off. Well, I hope that was scary enough for you. Until we scare again, this is Alistair Mortimer Caneswright signing off. Alistair closed his door with a sensational feeling of satisfaction. His stories this night were his own creations. Sometimes when he had been lessened and inspired, he would read submissions from other writers. But this night, he read two of his own horrifying. The night closed its darkness around the college town. Hard pressed to see, Alistair guided himself home, noticing the faint glimmer of artificial lights from windows and street lamps. But overall, the town was asleep, idle and in a dormant state. Alistair seemed to be the only one who was making his way home. After an exciting night of horror stories told exclusively by him for his many podcast listeners, he had no immediate plans for bed. He was a nocturnal creature, loving the nightlife. His thoughts were on the response he would get from his show. The show went out live, and people were free to respond as the show developed. Later, he would post it on various other sites which would promote his work. His voice was in high demand. Many broadcasters looked forward to his work because it brought a much larger audience. Alistair looked forward to reading his comments after the show. It was a way for him to wind down. Once he reached his humble abode, which was nothing like his audience likely believed he lived in, he first scooped up his hairless Sphinx cat, Abaddon, and made his way to the kitchen. There, he heated some milk in a dish, poked his finger in to make sure the temperature was acceptable, and let his kitty go at it while he booted up his computer. He poured himself a large orange juice and retrieved a bag of salted pretzels from the cupboard before plopping down loosely on his favorite broken-in leather chair. The monitor lit up, and the screen was inundated with message after message commenting on the stories he had read live on air. He read with great satisfaction. It appeared it was another hit. His mind whirled ahead, spiraling deliberations while musing over what was next. He had written many haunting stories of thrilling terror, but should be exhausted. Did he exhaust them so quickly? He he probably wouldn't read so many of his own in a row, so to string them out a while longer is probably the best idea. But one of the listeners were aware of Alistair. He was dying. The doctor gave him 6 months, and he had defied every prediction and was on 11 months plus. If he were honest, he had never felt better than right now. If he could freeze time, this would be the instance when he would make it stand still. He understood the odds were stacked against him. However, he was quite a fighter. He was the sort of guy that if you hit him and knocked down, you prayed he was out cold. Otherwise, he was going to get back up and give a real beating to you. Alistair read every comment and personally responded to his subscribers. A couple hours later, he and Abaddon settled off to bed. He was too exhausted for a second shower of the day. He would take care of the podcat stench in the morning. Sometimes in the night, he was awakened by a pinging sound. He could have sworn he had muted the sound on his computer, so he mustered the strength to get out of bed and mute the volume. He would not be able to bear the incessant sound all night. Soon as his head hit the pillow, he was out like a light. Bing! Again, his computer made a terrifically horrible sound. Mumbling to himself, he stormed to a computer like a drug zombie who had lost his cool. Not playing around this time, he muted the volume again and took the computer to the kitchen, far from his bedroom. Hopefully, he would not be disturbed again. Returning to his bedroom, he brushed Abaddon off his pillow and crashed into the bed with a thud. Abaddon was not bothered. He purred quietly in some feline dream world. Alistair jerked violently out of a deep sleep and did not know why. His brain was scrambled, but he quickly gathered his senses. He now realized something had given him a fright. There had been an uncommon sound from the kitchen. A commotion and disturbance, like a giant gong being smashed. Logically, he imagined the pan was unbalanced and slipped off into the sink or into the floor. He hoped, if it was the floor, that the tiles were not chipped or cracked. Staggering through the dimly lit hallway to the kitchen, trying to avoid stepping on Abaddon, who was dodging under his heels. In the dark, he stepped on one of the assorted cat toys lying around. It just so happened that it was a hard toy with the prongs which stick out. It didn't hurt as bad as a Lego, but it still smarted. He threw out a sleepily expletive and motored on towards the kitchen. Alistair flipped on the light. The kitchen looked normal. He saw nothing out of place. Wait. Its kitchen door, leading to the back door garden, was a tiny bit cracked. It was minuscule, hardly noticeable, yet he detected it. A chill raced down his spine. He was overflowing with anticipation and consequential excitement. Somewhat afraid, Alistair made a quick scan of the kitchen to ensure he was positively alone. If anybody or anything had entered the house, they would not have made it any further in the kitchen. He assured himself. Going to the door, his ears were perked for any noises. Slowly, he opened the door wider and turned on the backyard light. It was a powerful light that lit his narrow yard and shone as far as his rear gate, which led out into the main street. 6-foot hedges ran down the sides of his yard, thick and impenetrable. But there, impressed in the grass from the gate to the kitchen door, there was one set of footprints in the dew-covered grass. The footprints led to the door, but there was no evidence of them returning to the rear gate. How odd. Barefoot and only in boxers and a t-shirt, he opted not to check the gate just yet. He closed and locked the door. Still spooked and nervy about the door, he opted to get dressed, put on his shoes, which were in the bedroom, and investigate the backyard a little closer and with more scrutiny. With great suspicion and holding a Louisville Slugger baseball bat firmly in his hand, he entered the backyard. He measured his shoe size with the imprint in the grass. Whoever was lurking in his backyard had at least a size 12 shoe. He imagined that it was one big fella. Once Alistair reached the gate, his misgivings were confirmed. The gate was ajar. He did not like this. He did not like this one bit. Speedily, he secured the gate and turned to go back to the house. But something peculiar took place that gave him pause. The kitchen light flickered in sequence several times, and at the end of the blinking, the backyard light was extinguished. Holy mother of pearl, he said to himself. Stiffened in place with a sensation not much different than rigor mortis, Alistair watched the window of the lit kitchen. He was not going back until he was sure it was safe. Gathering his nerves, which were severely frayed at this point, he approached his house with a sense of dread and heightened caution. The kitchen light remained illuminated, and this gave him some assurance. Working his way up to the window, he sneaked a peek. Initially, he saw nothing. All looked as it should. He considered the all-light episode, and with no other evidence of eldritch happenings, the only plausible explanation was the bulb in the backyard must have shorted out. With his trepidation easing, he wanted to guarantee his safety, so he opted for another look through the window just to ease his fear. What he saw nearly made him pass out. He was in the kitchen. He saw himself on his back, turned toward him, standing at the table. The person hovering his kitchen table looked identical to him. They were even dressed like him. What the devil? The grip on the baseball bat loosened, as a paused terror swept over him like a hot towel and bore down into the pit of his gut to the point where he swayed with nausea. He leaned on the house with his shoulder and attempted to will strength back into his rubbery legs. Alistair was not necessarily a brave man. His courage had never really been challenged before. Oh, he stuck up for himself in high school when he bullied. But this was something otherworldly. Could it even be possible? How does something as bizarre as this even occur? This was just like the unutterable secrets he wrote and did voiceovers for on his podcast. He had to be imagining things. Of course, he attempted to dissuade himself. Maybe he was dreaming still. A rational answer would come to him. He knew it, but nothing came. The only thing he could convince himself of was there was a duplicate of himself haunting his own kitchen. The yard lit up, not with light from the back porch, but with a resonating chatter that could only be called al-as-if, which H.P. Lovecraft defined in his writing as that nocturnal sound made by insects supposed to be the howling of demons. The definition was birthed from the ruins of Babylon out of the empty space of amorphous crimson desert. Alistair had read all of Lovecraft's materials. Lovecraft was locked into secrets of grace older than mankind. The sounds Alistair was tortured with were far beyond the sound of common insects and bugs that crawl and fly at night. He pondered, what if Lovecraft had a phrase, al-as-if, defined incorrectly? What if he meant something altogether totally different? Possibly he was misunderstood, and it meant al-tajif, the blasphemy, and al-zanif, the bleeding. Alistair was unsure why these thoughts were penetrating his mind and obscuring his thoughts, along with breaking his concentration. He had to focus. What does any of this mean? What does it have to do with me? He forced himself to premise his thoughts, and once he had control of them and built up the boldness, he concluded that the kitchen and the unwanted occupant warranted another glance. With waning audacity, he took a glint inside the kitchen. Seeing no one, he slowly raised and surveyed everything in view. He held his lookout position for at least 60 seconds until he was confident the coast was clear. This is when he let out a sigh of relief, and his anxiety began to settle back to his comfort zone. With his equilibrium restored, it was time he took his chances. With his mind free from exile, he walked in through the back door into the kitchen and took notice of a manuscript on the table. It did not appear overly thick, but there were several pages. He tightened his grip once again on the handle of the bat near the knob end. With his free hand still eyeing the doorway from the kitchen into his hallway, he dragged the manuscript closer to him. He had to sit down his adrenaline had depleted. The manuscript was possibly animal skin and had a note attached to it. I am you, and you are me. There is only one way to be free. Read this work on your show. We must let the whole world know. Time is short, but there is still a chance to avoid the war of circumstance. Evil is rising. It is already here. Perfect love casts out all fear. No time to think or meditate. Do this now before it's too late. How unoriginal. A 2-year-old could have written that. Lame, dull. The manuscript was face down, so he turned it over. The title emasculated him for a brief moment. The title was burned into the cover. Monsters are real. Abandon all hope. The truth. Written by Alistair Mortimer Kainswright? Didn't write this. That was the moment the nightmare began. He heard light feet running, scampering from the far end of his hallway, coming towards the kitchen, growing louder as they approached. Alistair's vigor weakened even more. A dull throb forced pressure upon his temples, making him lightheaded, almost as if a smothering hand was suffocating him. His nose was smashed, and his lips could not utter a scream. His desperate cries were muted by a moist, enormous, invisible hand, and he was pulled to the tile floor. With his strength exhausted and dried up, as if all resilience had been sucked away by a siphon, Alistair was unable to defend himself or resist. Eventually, this horrifying episode subsided. Alistair had no answer to what he had been put through. His head hurt, his back ached. He was unsteady on his feet for a few minutes. He poured himself a glass of orange juice and sat contemplating the manuscript before him. Where had the footsteps gone? Nothing appeared. Nothing at all. Alistair then thought, monsters are real, abandon all hope. Simpletons, pure and simple, feigning stupidity. With a strong aversion and detestation, he was tempted to toss the manuscript into a fire pit. Although he loathed it, he cannot say conclusively whether the events of the night were real or imagined. In fact, the manuscript did have his name as the author. Curiosity alone compelled him to read it. The manuscript was redolent of an unhallowed age, as dusty as the antediluvian period. As vividly abhorrent as this night had been, he thought himself pretty lucky to be caught up in the unexplained. After all, his podcast promoted this subject matter. He never believed, while working in his studio domicile, that one day something of this magnitude would manifest itself. He was being revealed the actuality of what he was creating from his mind. But he could not shake the sight of his own double. It was entirely too unexplainably freakish. Opening the manuscript, whose pages felt brittle but did not crumble, he found the first entry, a poem without a title. There are creatures that creep and crawl. They are the beast inside us all. They turn and twist our simple minds into animals of every kind. From the darkness in great numbers they come to devour the many, to curse the some. From lofty heights they build their nests, and no man living shall find his rest. And from the earth, from deep underground, they are so ordered by the demonic sound. It rises up slowly to the unaware, and in a hush, you find yourself down there. Ugh, rubbish, pure rubbish, Alistair groaned. Chapter 1, turn to page 13. Short chapter, how very peculiar. Oh, he flipped his pages to page 13. Embedded within the page, within its own secure indentation, was a ring of some sort. The only words on the page in heavy black ink read, "Put the ring on your finger." "I will do no such thing," he protested, and closed the manuscript. The manuscript flew open on its own, phantasmically shuffling the pages rapidly back to page 13. The color of the words on page 13 now had chromatically changed from black to red. "Ludicrous," he denounced, and slid his chair away from the table. He stood at the table, looking down, his back to the window. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was behind him. Unwittingly, he turned his head to see what might be making the sound. To his transfixed horror and surprise, he saw himself in the window, looking in. A cold sweat ate at his chest and clawed his forehead. How could this be? The him that was outside was shouting something indistinguishable. Alistair tried to understand, to read his lips, but he could not interpret what his other self was conveying. Although reeling in tacit horror, he knew there was only one way to get answers. He raced across the kitchen, stormed through the back door, and had every intention of nabbing this lookalike. But his twin was not at the window any longer. It defied all reasonability. How could he have gone so quickly? Even more puzzling was when Alistair, who was now outside, looked in through the window and saw himself standing at the table where he just had stood. That's impossible. Absolutely illogical. No way. His twin was doing something. Alistair craned his neck to see. The twin put the ring on his finger, and in an instant, he was gone, vanished away. Alistair darted back into the kitchen. His twin was gone, but the manuscript remained turned to page 13. But the red letters were no longer red. The letters were charred into the page of the book as it delicately burned into a match. The ring was still lodged in the page. He fought against the temptation, but gave in and removed the ring from the page. He examined it, looked it over, and found an inscription which read, Isaiah 56:9. Every beast of the field come to devour every beast in the forest. Alistair remained mystified. With much hesitation, but compelled by a force too strong to resist, he placed the ring on his finger. As the ring slipped tightly around his finger, he spun around toward the window. His twin was there again. He was smiling and holding up his hand to show Alistair he too had placed the ring on his finger. He became instantly light on his feet, and everything in the kitchen became transparent with a translucent radiance. Seconds later, the house was gone from around him. Everything had disappeared. Unable to make any determination of what had occurred, he considered his ominous situation carefully. His surroundings were as barren and bleak as any, and utterly vast in an ominous desert as any he had ever seen. There was nothing nor no one for as far as the eye could see. The immemorial air was inexplicable at first. He choked, but after a couple of hard swallows, his throat adjusted. His next thought was to remove the ring, and hopefully this would return him home. But no matter how he twisted and tugged on it, the ring was truly stuck. Ah, this is great. He didn't even have his baseball bat. It must have not had the teleportation or whatever it was that just had transpired. But the manuscript lay at his feet. Ah, brilliant. He then turned to page 13, where I should have been, but there was no longer a page 13. Well, shit, this just keeps getting better. One more scan of the colossal, tenorific surroundings proved futile. Carrying the manuscript under his arm, half afraid to read any more, he began to walk in the way his feet were pointed. He figured since he had no compass and there was no sun, moon, or stars, he had 1 in 4 choices. He was going in the direction that was correct. There was no road, no path, no footprints, no signs, not a single tree or landmark. Truthfully, he could walk 100 miles on this flat plateau, might just be walking in circles. Alistair did not want to languish forever in this faceless realm. He estimated he had been walking for close to 30 minutes, when in the very far distance, he saw a blurb. There was something ahead that resembled a smudge on the landscape, and the smudge appeared to be coming toward him. Without realistic options, he continued his approach. As the two drew closer to one another, Alistair recognized the person. It was that scoundrel that had been in his kitchen. His twin. Alright, now for some answers. The two men mirrored one another. The twin looked behind them and began to run. To Alistair, it looked like a panic run. Alistair then had the presence of mind to take the hint. He glanced over his shoulder, only to see his worst nightmare. Giant, black, hairy-legged spiders were gaining on him. This arachnid cluster had to be in the thousands, and each spider as big as a grown man. The land behind him had turned dark, and the spiders were consistently and uniformly converging to his position. Alistair ran like he had never ran before. All things which wiggle, crawl, scuttle, or jump had joined the spiders in pursuit of Alistair. He looked straight ahead at his twin, who was coming just as hard and fast. Alistair did not see what his twin was running from. He detected nothing alarming within his field of vision, motivating him to run. Outside of reason and causation, overhead the sky lit up with lightning streaking across the sky in zigzags. Then the lightning strikes began. Alistair felt like a moving target. Because the terrain was so level, neither of the two saw the enormous crevice between them. They made eye contact right before both plunged to the unknown. When Alistair hit the water below, he flailed wildly, not expecting the cold explosion his body felt as it submerged. Miraculously, he bobbed back to the surface and splashed exhaustedly to the shore. But the shore was no place to be. The sands were alive with devilish creatures beneath the surface whose slimy tentacles emerged to wrap their suckers around them. Alistair fought for his life, popping the suction cups loose and staggering into the dense, sweltering vegetation of an unexplored jungle. There was no retreating. He could not begin to determine what hemisphere he was in. For all he knew, he could be anywhere in the world or outside of it. He was immediately accosted by living vines and aerating roots which sprung from the ground in crisscross patterns, over and under in knots, causing treacherous footfalls. His feet were being poked, prodded, groped, and grabbed at. He found it most difficult to battle all the elements, taking high steps and shaking loose his impediments. He wondered what happened to his twin. Did he drown, succumb to the jungle? He could not disregard the feeling of ineptitude. He should have tried to save him. Matter of fact, he never actually saw him fall. He only remembered looking into his own eyes. Where was the manuscript? Damn, he had lost that too. The jungle humidity slowly drained Alistair as he traversed to the unknown. He figured he had been in heat for an hour, and when the most unexpected sight appeared directly of him, it was his twin. Not knowing what to say, Alistair said the first thing that came to his mind. What is happening? Not expecting a reply, his twin answered studiously. We are happening, brother. We have the rings. Only one of us is going to make it back. Well, why is that? What is even this all about? There is only one of us. There can't be two. We both have the ring, but we are both candidates to go back. but there is only room for one. His twin was very matter of fact about the whole thing. Wait, who determines who goes back? We do. And I am torn between guilt and malignity. This makes no sense. You are not real. I am Alistair Caneswright. Look, I don't know what sort of game this is, but I will be going back. And I am you, reminded the twin, casting a formidable expression. Yeah, I don't think so. You're not human. You were created somewhere in space, behind time, in unbound outer regions. I am here because you hesitated putting on that ring. If you had only put on the ring, I would have not been needed. Needed for what? One of us must read the manuscript over the air. It is the only way to warn the world of what is coming, the impending storm. The world must prepare itself. There is a storm of barbarism and viciousness coming to the earth. The podcast will reach those who can make a difference. This ring is our forged protection, but only one of us can wear it. Alistair wasn't comprehending the full scope of what his twin was saying, but he was certain if only one was leaving, it was going to be him. So you say a storm is coming? Is it termination? A slaughter? Alistair didn't want to believe the worst, but nothing in these last few hours was believable. The annihilation is going to be on an apocalyptic scale. I would not have been needed if you had not hesitated to put on the ring. The warning must come from the podcast. So what if I agree to go back and read the manuscript? Where does that leave you, since you're only a shadow of who I am? A shadow? I am what you were not. Why do you believe the Pantheon brought me into being? Azathoth has called me forth to prepare the world. You are speaking of an abomination. Azathoth is a grotesque mockery of everything lawful, moral, and godly. You are talking about a world gone mad. You are not trying to warn people. You are trying to induce chaos. Ha! You are not as stupid as we penned you. Penned me? Yes. We wrote that part you are playing. You can't kill an elder god. They live beyond the concepts of time. You attack an elder god in one place, he already exists in the eons, so he lives on. They are beyond us. Look, you're not real. I have done my homework. I can simply remove you from the plane of my own awareness. And once done, you and these false gods go bye-bye. Sorry if I seem apathetic, but you do not know what you're talking about. You can't win. I am the genuine Alistair. The gods need me, not you. I'm here because they don't need you. I can defeat them by my willingness to read the manuscript, which contradicts their decision to bring you into existence. They need an authentic reading of the manuscript, and you cannot do that. Unquestionably, a veritable representative is what they desire. Carbon copy won't do. Alistair came straight at the twin. His other self fell among the protruding roots which clung to him and bound him tight. No, I can do it. I want to exist. I am you. The twin went into some grotesque convulsions as the poison of the roots, also known as Giftblar, attacked his nervous system. Alistair watched as his short-lived body was dragged into the canvas of the jungle floor, and in the self-imposed grave he would stay, rendered powerless. Alistair could not be sure what happened next, but in an instant, his consternation and dismay was gone, and once again, he stood before his kitchen table, looking down at the grimoire manuscript. He looked at his hand, and there was no ring. Quickly, before the powers that had changed their mind and he had lost favor, he turned to page 13. There was the ring, and in black letters it read, "Put the ring on your finger." Emblazoned with a mental plan, without faltering, he removed the ring from the book and slipped it on his finger. He was more than convinced this was the correct resolution. He prayed this would restore order. In that moment, he never felt more alone, abandoned, as a cold depression oozed its way into an irrevocable uneasiness to the forefront of his conscience. He wore the ring until his next podcast, where he introduced the show as a must-read and a take heed, for the words of this story are true. At last, he read, "Beyond the reaches of the stars, an army is forming from the outer worlds, calling all to gather into one place for an invasion plan, predestined, foreordained, and ordered. Cosmic winds will guide the armies of beastly discontent to the door of the host, who will not resist but submit to the undwelling of the gods. They are no longer fading thoughts of the past, but are now presenting themselves upon the stage of humanity. That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons, even death may die. Prepare yourself for the death of death." The podcast continued without interruption, and in concluding after the manuscript had been read in its entirety, Alistair added, "Everything I read tonight, I am asking. No, I am imploring you. Remove these gods from the plane of your wellness, and the warning which you have heard will be no more than a dark whisper that brushes against your cheek at a gravesite. The ravens are gathering, the wolves are descending from their mountain refuge, but you and I can hold them at bay. I have done my part. I have fulfilled my commitment to read the letter from the elder gods to humanity. Now, will you join me in the resistance against the horde to come? The best way to kill a god is to stop believing in it. Decide it is an omnipotent power that we all possess, and join me in defeating death with our best weapon: human incredulousness." Alistair stood from his podcast chair and walked to the bathroom. He removed the ring he had worn from page 13 and happily dropped it in the toilet. With a flush, he sealed humanity's fate. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco, back again. Another short horror story for you guys, written by Old School Horror. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to them. Like, comment, and subscribe. I don't know who will believe me, but I don't care anymore. This thing had been eating at me for decades, and I must tell it before I die. I feel death coming closer and closer. Or if it's not death, I'm afraid it's something way worse. I've told no one about the events which happened in 1963, not even my husband. I know there should be no secrets between husband and wife, but I haven't told him anything because I was afraid he will say I'm crazy. He used to be way too pragmatic. Fortunately, a few years after the events, I moved from Indonesia to Australia, but it did nothing to help me forget. The nightmares were relentless and still are. I've chosen to record it instead of writing it down. Arthritis got to me really badly over the last few years. I'm way too tired even for a simple act of writing. So, here it goes. Back then, I was about 17 years old. I lived with my family in the Paku village, in the Tanah Toraja area, close to Lake Poso. It was a wonderful place. Bamboo forests and rice fields covered extensive areas of hills and valleys. And the people were simple, helpful, and respectful. They were avid keepers of our traditions, family values. I don't know how things might have changed. I haven't been back for a long time. I lived with my mother, Atara, my father, Saito, my brother, Jabir, and my sister, Naka. My parents had another child, a boy named Angono, but he died when he was 7. He drowned in Lake Poso, and since then, my mother had never been the same person. She was the only one with him on the fatal day. He was busy collecting fruit and didn't see Angono going in the lake. He drowned under her helpless eyes. Several times a year, she went to visit the site where Angono had been placed. Not buried, because our people placed their dead on hillside graves, named lemos. My father, seeing that she was relentless, had built her a small hut near the place so she could be close to him whenever she visited. He usually left for a few days. Despite my father's insistence, he always went alone and brought provisions with her from home. One day, in March 1963, he left, but did not return after the usual period of about 3 days. The first night after her departure, the weather began worsening. That night, heavy rain fell and thunder cracked the sky relentlessly. We were all worried. My father wanted to give her the privacy she needed to cope with her grief and be together with her son. She had been away several times when the weather had been bad. This time, however, It was weird because it changed way too suddenly. It was almost the end of the raining season, so we did not expect too much bad weather. My father fought the urge to go to her. On the sixth day, however, he could not wait any longer. He woke up in the morning, headed straight to the hillside. I remember his face. It was grave and worried. We all wanted to join him, as our traditions dictate to be close to each other. But he refused. When he returned, I was the first one to spot him through the window of the tokonan, which is the traditional house of our people. I ran out to meet him. What happened? Where is mother? Jemima, my dear, he said and hugged me tight, then sobbed. Father, what's wrong? Why won't you tell me? Of course, I knew what happened. There was only one answer, but I foolishly hoped he might say something else. My dear, your mother is dead. He uttered the only words I didn't want to hear. And then I cried. My siblings saw us outside, came to us, and then they cried too. Soon, the entire village knew. My father spoke to the village head, Kuwat. The elders gathered in a hurry, and they marched to the hut where my mother lay dead. She had likely died on the first night after she went there. Nobody knew what had happened. My father told me everything, but later, when he was already insane after following events. My father and the elders found the body laying on its back on the hut's floor. It was in terrible condition, not just because of the decay, but because of rats and other critters. They also found several items in the hut which showed that my mother tried to do some forbidden ritual, which was deemed to be witchcraft. In the village, people considered her a healer because she had helped whomever she could. Of course, we had our shaman, and who had lived many years and many seasons, but my mother was also among those capable of healing. But in secret, they had been trying to do much more than heal. The items in the hut suggested they had tried to reach out to Angono. I know how this sounds, but for my people, these beliefs were important. They believed in the afterlife, or Puya, as it's called in our language. We believe that if a funeral ceremony is conducted under our customs, then the soul will pass into the afterlife and be at peace. But if not, it will become a bombo, or wandering spirit. Among the things they had found, there was also a mirror which had belonged to my mother. I recognized it right away because back then there were only a few people who had such an item. Also, I used it many times, so I was familiar with it. Mirrors were considered windows into the afterlife by some shamans, especially those who tried to talk to the ones from the other side. Many of our people had even refused to use mirrors since they thought it would be witch's tool. The mirror and other items had been brought back to the village, and the shaman looked at them closely. When he saw the mirror, his face became pale. I was there to witness it. My other siblings were too young, so my father forbade them to witness serious matters such as this. "What's wrong, Slamet?" Father asked. "It is what I feared." Tara performed a papugian to talk to her dead son. "Look here." Papugian was forbidden witchcraft in our language. He pointed to the mirror. My father's face dropped. I felt goosebumps all over my body when I saw it. A face was visible on the glass, like a faint breath on a window. A pale and childlike figure was staring back at us with empty eyes. The shaman tried to wipe it away, but it didn't work. On the backside, the mirror was painted black. There was no explanation. Her grief had been too hard to bear, but she shouldn't have done this, Slamet said. Oh no. Ongono has passed into Puya. The ritual of Rambu Solok had been completed. She knew it's not right to disturb those who had passed. Is that why she had died? I don't know. I think she died of fright, but we will never know. Maybe the ritual had upset the spirits of the ancestors, and they had struck her dead. My dear Tara, how will she pass now into Puya? I don't know. We must do the Rambu Salak with as much faith as we can. We must pray for forgiveness and hope we will peace and please the ancestors. If not, the consequences will be grave. Her spirits will become vengeful, damned to forever haunt the living. Only a twisted, corrupted version by hate and suffering. Her grief had poisoned her spirit, my father said. Yes, but there is still hope, if the ancestors are kind enough. I saw tears on my father's cheeks. Of course, I understood his grief, but I did not understand the part about the afterlife and the fact that Rambu Salak, or funeral, had to be done right. Of course, everything became painfully clear later, but at that point, I did not know. They placed my mother's body in the northern area of the house called Alang Banua, on an altar. This area was the most sacred part of every house. Then, the preparations began. The body had to be prepared for the funeral ceremony. This consisted of washing it with oils and herbs to try to preserve it. The use of formaldehyde was not yet common in this area. Also, given the state of the body, they had to wrap it in cloth to prevent pieces from falling off. I still remember how the house smelled. It was a horrible combination of herbs, oils, stale sweat, and putrefaction. I can still feel it sometimes out of the blue. Makes my stomach turn every time. These days, as I feel my end coming closer, I seem like feeling it more often. The weather was not improving. It rained a lot and the air was heavy. Despite this, however, the entire village worked as one to prepare the funeral. Buffaloes, pigs, and chickens were slaughtered to prepare for the feast. People were singing and dancing to celebrate life and make the burden of death more bearable. But given the weather, the celebration was sadder than usual. Fortunately, me and my siblings did not have to participate in preparation of the body. Still, from the first night on, weird things began to happen. The dogs around our house were barking all night, and our 2 cats were nowhere to be seen. They came home each evening for a few scraps till my brother's body had been in the house. The cats refused to come home. I couldn't fall asleep, then I had to go out to the outhouse. Jabir and Naka were sleeping in their beds, so I took careful steps to go outside. People were still chanting in the northern room. The air was chilly, and I shuddered, but went to the outhouse to do my business. When I came back, however, my skin erupted in goosebumps, despite not seeing nor hearing anything out of the ordinary, except the dogs. I was at the foot of the wooden stairs which were leading into the house. Under the house, there was a storage area which we call a loam. I looked between the rungs of the stair under the house. Some kind of instinct told me there was danger lurking down there. Then, behind some wooden crates, I saw a black shape. It was pretty dark under the house, but given that there was light coming from the other nearby houses, it was not completely dark. I froze for a few seconds as I tried to figure out what it was when it slid behind the crates with one smooth move and without sound. My feet instantly jerked and pushed me up to the house, while I imagined some icy hands grabbing my ankle and dragging me down into darkness. I ran to my bed and lay there motionless, watching the doorway. Nothing came in all night, but of course, I didn't sleep a minute. I thought about telling my father about the black shape. I didn't want to upset him more, so I chose not to. By the next night, they finished the coffin. Several men had been working on it to make it as ornate as possible, but also to finish quickly. My father could not bear the sight of my mother's body in the shape it was in. He also considered himself guilty, so each look he gave my mother's body bore a small piece out of him. In the meantime, people were busy preparing the bamboo scaffolding which was used to carry the coffin to the burial site. Slamet, the shaman, was there to make sure everything was exactly as the Torosian traditions dictated. The weather got slightly better. The ground was full of pools filled with rainwater. It was dripping from rooftops and trees all day. The sun refused to come out, so the sky remained overcast. I feared the coming of the night. Before falling asleep, I prayed to the spirits of our ancestors, or puangs as we call them, to have mercy on us. I prayed long and promised them as much as I could. Appeasing the ancestors was important in the Tarajan culture. We did it by prayers and animal sacrifices mostly. This was why my father provided so many animals to be sacrificed during the funeral preparations. He knew my mother had committed a terrible deed, but he tried his best to make it right. Me and my siblings went to sleep. Quite some time had passed before I finally began drifting into the land of dreams. Instead of a dream, I had a nightmare. In it, I wandered into the Alang Banua, where my mother's coffin had been placed. Somehow, the house was empty and there was complete darkness outside. I crept closer to the coffin, but then I heard knocking from inside it. This was when I jerked awake, but the knocking did not stop. It came from under my bed, from the floor. I immediately thought back to the shape under the house and felt cold shivers all over. Curled up in my bed and began praying to my ancestors to have mercy on me. Soon, the knocking stopped and I wearily drifted asleep. The next morning, lots of people gathered outside our house. It was the day of the funeral. The whole village was there, and they brought the bamboo scaffolding, which was used to transport the coffin to its final resting place. Clouds began gathering overhead, and I smelled rain in the air. I looked at Slamet, and his face was pale and haggard. People were chanting and singing, but he was silent. I went closer to him, and then I saw something glittering under his colorful clothing. It took me a few seconds to realize it was a large knife, which was usually used to cut shrubbery. It resembled a machete. I was wondering why did Slamet bring the knife with him. Then I foolishly thought it was part of the ritual somehow. Anyhow, the pallbearers brought the coffin out of the house amidst the chants, which were interrupted by sounds of thunder and lightning flashes. Honestly, everything about that day seemed wrong. But what came after was the most horrible event I have ever witnessed. When the pallbearers were carrying the coffin up the bamboo ladder to reach the top of the scaffolding, rain began falling in small drops. They almost brought the coffin up, and one of the pallbearers screamed in horror, "Let it go." The heavy wooden box fell on a bystander, crushing him beneath. People began screaming, running toward the scaffolding. Some of the coffin's planks broke, and I saw my mother and bald hand stick out when it fell to the ground. Then the hand moved. The sudden silence made me stop in my tracks. Everyone who saw it stopped dead. Those behind pushed forward, but then a scream came from the coffin. It was so horrible. My legs buckled and I almost fainted. Then I saw the planks move, and my mother, who had been dead for several days, scrambled out of the rubble. Her endless screams made most people bolt for their lives. Some fainted, others just stood and watched, transfixed by the horror. The screams were coarse, full of anguish and pain. When I saw her eyeless and lipless face, I screamed too, as loud as my throat and lungs let me. This was when she noticed me in the crowd. I don't understand how this was possible, or any of it was possible. She just noticed me and stopped screaming for a few seconds, then started toward me. I saw Slamette draw the large knife and ran to her. This was when I understood the role of the knife. Slamette knew what was going to happen, and he armed himself. Since my mother had tried to summon a dead person who had already passed into the afterlife, he was being punished by the ancestors. He was denied entry into Puya and was sent back to her decaying body to suffer. Slamette raised the knife to strike, but she jumped on him mid-swing and bit mercilessly to his throat. He screamed, but could not fight off the possessed corpse, and his blood gushed everywhere. 3 of the older members of our tribe died of a heart attack when they witnessed this. Many more fainted. I just screamed. My poor father was the only one who gathered his courage and ran to Samlet's aid, even though there was not much hope. He grabbed the knife, which was laying in the dust, and began hacking. I couldn't watch, so I turned away, but I still hear the screams. My mother's raspy, guttural shrieks combined with my father's desperate, tear-filled wails in a terrible cacophony. Adding to that, the soft chops of the blade as it cut through the dead flesh, and the nauseating smell which engulfed the area made me throw up. The screams faded, then there was silence. My father fell on his back. By that time, rain was pouring profusely, but he didn't care. Nobody cared. It was washed blood and decay away. Nobody from the crowd had ever seen such an event, except from Slamette. But he couldn't tell more tales. My life became hell after that event. The elders decided to burn my brother's body was against everything the Tarajan people believed in. They couldn't think of anything else, and also didn't want to risk it happening again. My mother's ashes were cast into Lake Poso, but that did not put an end to the strange events. I still saw a dark shape under the house, or heard knocking or scratching from various places. After coming to Australia, I thought these events would stop. I was dead wrong. To this day, I see the dark shape appear in shadowy corners. Sometimes I hear shuffling from empty rooms. For a few weeks, the events are happening more frequently. Honestly, can't take it anymore. Maybe I have mental issues and my trauma is manifesting itself. I don't know. No shrink could make it stop. All I know is that I wish there was no afterlife at all. I just want to go in peace, feel nothing. One lifetime of suffering had been enough. I don't want to see my mother's spirit, or whatever that thing is, anymore. I don't want to meet my ancestors, who I sent her back to this world to suffer for eternity. I just want it to end. Oh no, the shape is there again. Near the window, behind the sofa. Why won't you leave me alone? Go away. I've had enough. It just stares at me, not moving. The temperature is dropping. This had never happened before. Whispers. I hear whispers. Oh no. Coming toward me. The following news article appeared in the Brisbane Times on the 4th of April, 2023. 77-year-old Jeremiah Duncan had been found dead from a heart attack in her Brisbane apartment. Preliminary examination of the body indicated heart failure because of extreme fright as the cause of death. More information will be known after the autopsy. Interestingly enough, an intriguing recording had been found on her phone. At first, investigators thought it was a farewell recording, but it tells a gruesome tale, possibly caused by delirium or hallucinations for her death. No other family member had been inside the apartment at the time of her death, nor were there any signs of foul play. This was all we could have found out about the weird circumstances of her death, and that events baffled the investigators who were trying to piece together the puzzle. The investigation is still ongoing. She had left behind 3 children and 7 grandchildren. May she rest in peace. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Your boy Ceresco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. We got another one written by Old School Horror. Remember to use the links, show love to them, like, comment, and subscribe. The first time I heard them was when I was about 12. I went to bed at 9 and soon fell asleep. After a long day at school and a lot of hide and seek with my friends, I was dead tired. Nights already becoming hot as June were creeping closer, but not even that could keep me from sleeping. Not even my parents arguing downstairs, as it had happened many times before. I woke up in the middle of the night, and at first, I heard nothing unusual. But then, the sound of faint breathing hit my ear. Right away, my heart began beating fast. My body froze. I held my breath and listened. Crickets chirped outside. The whippoorwills were especially noisy. Even so, I was hearing somebody breathing in the room. I was lying motionless under the thin cover. Sweat was drenching me from head to toe. I tried to figure out what was happening. I was sleeping on my left side, facing the bedroom door. The window was behind me. Despite the room being well lit by the moon, I saw nothing. I thought maybe whatever was breathing was behind me. Turning around was out of the question. I thought about screaming, but then I would have woke up my parents. My mother was not the problem, but my father could be really grumpy when he woke up. So I decided against risking a spanking or causing another fight between them. After a while, either the breathing stopped or I fell asleep somehow. When I opened my eyes in the morning, the night's experience came back to me. I froze again and listened. Nothing. I sighed and I slowly turned. The room was filled with bright sunlight. Then I realized it was Saturday and I was already feeling restless. Couldn't wait to have a quick breakfast and head out to play with my friends. When I went downstairs, I saw my mother sitting alone at the table. She had that obvious 100-mile stare, and I knew why. My dad had already gone out with his friends, but not to play. He had a well-established routine, and we all knew it. He would come home after midnight, staggering, blubbering, and reeking like a barrel of draft. I kissed my mother on the cheek, which painted a smile on her face, ate breakfast, and headed out. Playing with my neighbor's friends was one of the few activities which I loved. It also made me forget all the bad stuff which was happening at home. When the weather was bad, I occupied myself with either reading or watching the television. I didn't really like watching the TV in my room because it was so small. My father considered that a small kid needs a small TV, so there's no reason to spend money on a bigger one. But of course, he had money to buy booze, play poker, or pay strippers. Me and my friends were out all day. Our house was at the edge of town, and not far away. There was a small wooded area. We were spending most of our time there, under the protective shade of the trees. But when I went home, different kinds of shadows came upon me. My father came home, and of course, he was wasted. The usual argument broke out. I was already in bed, thinking about last night. I was afraid to fall asleep, but when I was close to drifting away, I heard the shouting downstairs. Fortunately, it did not last long, and I fell asleep. I woke up later, same as last night. Everything was silent, except the breathing. But this time, I also heard whispers. I was desperately hoping that I was just imagining sounds, but after several minutes of holding my breath and listening, I was sure they came from the room. Of course, I panicked, but I dared not move. Sweat drenching my body and my heart was jumping out of my chest. I began praying, but it seemed like God was on a vacation because it had no effect at all. I think I lay there for about half an hour or so before the whispers finally stopped. After several minutes, I gathered enough courage to move. I reached my bedside lamp and switched it on. Nothing. The room was empty. Then I looked at the clock on the nightstand. It was 4:12 a.m. I couldn't fall asleep anymore. Ghosts, I thought. Ghosts were haunting our house, like in the movies. I had a great urge to tell my mother, but I feared she will think I was crazy. Also, I didn't want to give my father a reason for another argument. I had breakfast and headed out, but not to play. I headed straight to one of my friend's house. His mother had all kinds of books about occult stuff, and I figured I might find out what was happening to me. This was at the end of the pre-internet era. The books were pretty much the only source of information out there. She gladly lent me some of her books and was happy I had an interest in the subject. I didn't want to tell her either. She was a really talkative person, and everybody knew you couldn't keep a secret. As my father was out again and my mother was watching TV, I went into my room unbothered. The first book I took into my hands was When Two Worlds Meet by Mary A. Fletcher. He was a parapsychologist. In it, he talked extensively about the witching hour, which was the period between 3 and 4 a.m. During this time, the barrier between our world and the spirit world is the thinnest, though it is a period of high spiritual activity. He also mentioned that some people are more sensitive than others, and the spirits are drawn to them. I was wondering if I was sensitive or not, since they had never been drawn to me before. Well, now I know. Back then, it frightened me, knowing that I may hear or see souls of dead people, also not knowing what they wanted. Terrifying. Again, I didn't want to tell anyone. I thought about waiting to see if it goes away. It didn't. When bedtime came, I decided to sleep with my bedside lamp turned on. It gave me some feeling of security, you know? I still woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of whispering and raspy breathing. The air was cold, oppressive, and my skin erupted in goosebumps. I definitely felt them in the room, but I saw nothing yet. My vision was hazy, and my instinct signaled me that there was a threat in the room. That was when something in the shadows started moving. I froze and hoped with all my heart that it was just a trick of my mind. But it wasn't. A dark human made a menacing step toward my bed from one of the opposite corners. I screamed at the top of my lungs, and the shadow drew back. But not because I screamed, but because hurried footsteps came from the stairwell outside. My chest was heaving wildly when my mother stepped in. She immediately rushed to me and embraced me. My father's heavy steps came a few seconds later. Oh, what happened, honey? You have a bad dream? No, it was not a dream. I saw somebody in my room. Nobody's in the room. What the hell are you talking about? Don't, just leave him alone, please. He had a bad dream. It wasn't a dream, Mom. I saw somebody right there. I was awake and the lamp was on. I saw somebody. Don't be ridiculous. The windows are shut and there's no place for anybody to hide in here. Why are you sleeping with the lamp on? I'm afraid. I've been hearing breathing and whispers at night. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Look, honey, we'll figure it out. I think I already figured it out. He was checking the windows when he stumbled upon the pile of books on the other side of the bed. He took the pile up in his brothy, bricklayer hands and looked at each of the books with thick, furrowed eyebrows. When Two Worlds Meet, Signs from the Other Side, Hour of the Witch, Shadow People. What the hell is this? Leave him alone, please. My mother tried to stop him, but he ignored her. Of course he's frightened. Look at all this shit. How can he not be frightened when he's reading this crap? Reading books for school is what he should be doing. I just tried finding out what happened to me. I'm sorry. Look, maybe he's just afraid to talk to us. What? Are you afraid of talking to me? Yes. Well, here I am. Talk to me. Don't be such a wimp. Stop, my mother shouted. Come on, don't tell me what to do, he said, while pointing menacing at her. And it's time for both of you to listen. This goddamn circus will stop once and for all. At his age, I was helping my father lay bricks in this town. I had no time for ghosts, stupid books, because I was building houses. I'm not busting my ass to work all day, so I come home to ghost stories and whining. What about busting your ass at the bar with your idiot friends, huh? Drinking and playing poker all night? Is that how you take care of us? His eyes flashed with fire, and his face distorted in a grimace of indignation. The slap followed, and it was a powerful one. It hit my mother right on her cheek. Her head bumped into mine, and we both fell onto the bed. I put food on the table so you two don't starve. I drink and play whenever I please to. He headed towards the door, then stopped and turned to us. No more lamps during the night unless you pay for it. He then stormed out the room, and my mother remained with me. We both cried, and for some time, and then we laid silently, bracing each other. Then a shallow and troubled sleep came, but at least the spirits didn't bother us tonight. In the morning, I went to school. I didn't talk much to anybody. Didn't really care. My father left for work early, as usual. My mother called in sick because her face was blue, swollen. She didn't want to present to herself like that at the post office, where they employed her as a clerk. In a few hours, the whole town would have known that she'd been beaten up by her loving and caring husband, who was struggling to put food on the table and gallons of beer in his belly. My father came home late that night, probably drunk. My mother was already sleeping, so there was no chance for an argument happening. I, tired both physically and mentally, So, I fell asleep. The dreaded waking during the witching hour had come, of course. I saw no shapes this time, but the whispering got louder. It seemed that several people were arguing about something. The cacophony was maddening. I stuck my fingers into my ears as hard as I could. Some of the noise still slipped through. It resonated in my head endlessly. Then, somehow, I fell asleep again. The next day at school was hell. Couldn't pay attention to anything. I was dead tired. The math teacher called me out to the blackboard to solve a problem, but I was just stuttering, giving them wrong answers. My classmates laughed, and I was more alone than ever. I went home, and after giving a hearty embrace to my mother and eating a little, I went up to my room. Fortunately, my father did not throw out the books, so I could read some more. Plus, I wasn't in the mood for going out or watching TV. I fell asleep before he came home, but I woke up again during the witching hour. Before opening my eyes, I was already hearing whispers. I gathered some courage and opened them. To my horror, I saw two shadowy figures beside my bed who seemed to be talking to each other. I uttered a faint and reflexive gasp. Then both of them turned their heads towards me. They knew I was awake. One of them leaned close to me, as if inspecting me. My bladder let go, but I didn't even notice. I was frozen. Then one of them spoke, and the voice seemed to come from inside my head.
Kill him, and we will take him away. Don't be afraid, he will come home soon. Kill him and free yourself.
And so it was that, during that night, I became friends with the dead. How ironic. Everybody seems to be afraid of the dead. You know, zombies, ghosts, vampires. But they are not the ones we should be afraid of. The living are the most evil. No monster can hold a candle to them.
Kill him,
Another disembodied voice whispered.
kill him.
Another one as well. They began to show themselves, as if materializing from the darkness itself.
Kill him, kill him, kill him,
They all said. But every whisper reverberated in my skull, a maddening intensity. I heard him enter the house. This time, my mother was waiting for him. I thought she probably had no more patience and decided to confront him. He did. A few minutes after my father entered the house, the argument was on. Shouts and curses flew in all directions. I almost shouted myself. He was drunk, and I could easily tell by the way he spoke. Then I heard a slap. That was it. I stood up, and the spirits of the dead retreated. They watched from the shadows as I slowly opened the door through a crack, then paced to my small television. I unplugged it, then lifted it up. Felt like a piece of feather. I carried the TV to the door, opened it with my foot, then cautiously walked out. Below me, in the hall, my mother and father were still screaming at each other. My mother was holding one hand on her cheek and was crying. They did not see me. My father closed in to hit her again, but she pushed him. He staggered back a few steps right below me, and then the voices began again. Kill him. Kill him, they said, and I obeyed. I lifted the TV above the woven railing and let it fall. He was in the middle of a curse when the TV's sharp corners hit him straight in the head. He fell right away. Blood was flowing from the wound while his body convulsed. My mother uttered a scream, but it was only because of the surprise. She then looked at me and followed me with her gaze as I walked down the stairs. Mom, I peed myself. It's alright, honey. Let's get you cleaned up. She offered her hand. I took it, but then pointed to my father's body, which was lying, now motionless, on the floor. With eyes wide open and empty, he was staring into nothingness. She looked at him for a few seconds with disgust painted all over her face. You won't mind. Come on. She didn't help me clean myself up. Of course, she had to call the police. Many people knew my father, so there was no point in hiding his body. The cops would have come to our house pretty soon. I would have found out everything. So my mother's plan was to tell them he killed them and wanted to send me away to my grandparents while she went to prison. But the cops were smart, and they knew right away that her story was a lie. Then, when they told me they knew I did it, I just told them the truth. The spirits of the dead had me do it. I stuck to the story. There was no point in lying. I was a terrible liar anyway. This, as you know, was a sure ticket to a mental asylum. After they did the necessary examinations, they determined I needed psychiatric care. So they took me away from my mother. She tried desperately to get me out of there. After trying several times, she finally found a lawyer who accepted to help her at a price she could afford. We've never had enough money. After my father died, we had even less. At first, she didn't tell me what the lawyer was up to, but I saw in her face that something was not right. I only found out after getting out and talking to the single person who would talk to me, the friend whose mother had lent me the books. He told me that the lawyer tried to exploit my mother. He had promised that he would get me out for no charge, but in exchange for sexual favors. My mother was desperate, so she accepted. But as time went by, I was still locked up in the asylum. When she found out that she was being used, and chances were high I would not get out soon, she hung herself. I only realized a letter from her, that she wrote she was sorry, and that all hope had left her. There was nothing more for her to live for. After about 10 years after her death, I finally got released. I did everything in my power to cheat their tests so I can be free. Now, I came back to the house. It still stands, but in ruin. I don't mind. For me, this still be a comforting home. I'm just sitting here, waiting for the witching hour to talk to my dead friends again. In the asylum, I haven't seen them. I guess they're waiting for me to come back here. And yes, indeed, they came to me from the shadows. My mother was also with them. She was happy to see me. I asked her about my father, but she laughed. He's deep down in the darkness. He will never see the light again, and he will harm us no more. But you, my son, have work to do. What work? Make them pay. We've suffered enough. Time to make those who had wronged us suffer. Just remember those who laughed at you at school. Remember the abuse from the asylum, the abuse I suffered when I fought to get you out. No foul deed should go unpunished. Yes, yes, mother, I will make them pay. He retreated to the darkness. All of them retreated, but I felt they were close, watching. I clenched my fist and then turned to the window. The glass was gone for a long time. Clouds were gathering in the sky above, and faint flashes of lightning flickered in the distance. The dead were by my side, and I found my new purpose. The witching hour called for blood, and I already knew who the first victim will be. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? Strasco back again, here with the final chapter of our new story. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying it. Please remember to show some love to the author. Check out the links in the description below. Like, comment, and subscribe. Early in the morning, residents of Belhurst woke to a blazing inferno not far on a little hill. The firefighters, emergency personnel, and the police rushed there as fast as they could. The press were there shortly after. Jay Simmons, who was working on the local newspaper, wrote the following article. The strange occurrence of Belhurst. In the early morning hours of the 16th of September 2018, first responders had been alerted to a burning old house on the outskirts of Belhurst. By the time the firefighters reached the place, it was completely engulfed in flames. It took several hours and also help from nearby towns in order to extinguish the inferno. The first strange thing was that near the house, emergency personnel found two children, obviously in shock. One of them was 10 years old, the other 12. They kept babbling about spiders, fire, and their dead parents who were supposed to have perished in the fire. It is true that firefighters recovered two bodies, most likely belonging to two adults, but they were both carbonized, so an autopsy will be necessary to determine their identity. Second strange thing was that the place was full of charred spider corpses. Most of them were as large as the largest spiders from Australia. Who knows how many smaller ones died in the fire? The children said there were millions of them, and the spiders attacked them in their sleep not long before morning. The third strange thing was that while searching the ruins of the house, one firefighter stepped on something which might have been a basement door once and fell in. The place which he fell into was not a basement anymore, but the beginning of an underground cave system which seemed to go in many directions, including straight down to the earth. It was littered with thousands of dead spiders, which have most likely been suffocated by the smoke or killed by the heat. The fourth strange thing was that, as people from Belhurst have reported, there were several cases of spider infestation in the past month. Residents complained that spiders came out of their toilets, sinks, and bathtubs. Also, there were many cases of basements overrun by these creepy crawlers. The pest exterminators from town reported that they have received countless calls and their teams have been overwhelmed. They also admitted that they have never seen anything like these events before. The two children have been taken to the hospital and isolated for now. Professional counselors are working together with healthcare professionals in order to help them and also try to learn more information about the strange incident. In any case, the area had been sealed and specialized teams were called in. Speleologists, biologists, and units of the CDC will arrive soon. The authorities are urging the people of Belhurst to stay clear of the area until it is declared safe. Also, if there are any signs of spider infestation, they are urged to alert the authorities without delay. And that, ladies and gentlemen, the end of our story. Yo, what is up, everybody? So let's go back again with another chapter from our new horror story. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author, like, comment, and subscribe. The spaghetti was delicious, and the adults downed a few glasses of wine with the food. Jenny and Carl got orange juice. Emily saw with a joyful heart that the family was together again, and not only physically. Eve joked a lot and talked a lot while smiling. Emily felt better than ever. She didn't think she could bring them together so quickly, but now it seemed that she was successful. She reached for Steve's hand, which was across the table, and squeezed it. Steve squeezed back, then winked at her. Emily smiled again, then decided that the children have to go to sleep. The kids agreed to go back to the upstairs bedroom. Steve assured them that the spiders should not be a threat anymore, because he killed most of them. Tomorrow, he will finish the job and he will eradicate the remaining ones, if there are any left. After the adults left, Carl was still somehow reluctant to fall asleep. Virginia reassured him that there was nothing to be afraid of. Emily wanted to take advantage of Steve's good mood. So after they slid under the covers, she immediately began kissing him. He returned her kisses, and soon they were lost again in each other's arms, just like on their wedding night. When the passionate loving was over, Steve shambled into the kitchen to drink water. His throat was dry from the alcohol and other pleasurable exercises. He switched on the light and looked straight at the basement door. In the corner of his eyes, he saw something move there. It was small and black, and it disappeared quickly into the cracks. Don't worry, I'll take care of you tomorrow. Goddamn parasites. After drinking a hefty amount of water, he went back into the master bedroom. Emily was already half asleep. He too fell asleep in a few minutes after sliding under the covers. His dreams were not peaceful, however. Steve dreamt of being in a hole in the ground. It looked like a grave, and spiders were all around the hole. He lay there motionless, couldn't move. As the spiders were approaching and threatening to crawl all over him, he tried to move. He tried desperately to get up and run away, but somehow couldn't. It was like his body was dead, but not his mind. The spiders reached him and began crawling on his legs. They then went higher, covering his body and his face. He felt them entering his nostrils, crawling all the way into his throat, and trying to eat their way out of his brain. Some of them even tried his eyes, which were open. Steve felt their small jaws gnawing at his eyeballs. Steve jerked away with a loud gasp and realized that it was not a dream. The spiders were real, and they were crawling all over him and his wife. He screamed, jumping out of bed, and began frantically brushing them off his hands. Emily woke up too. When she noticed the swarm, she did the same. She was much more hysterical, however. "God damn it, get off me, fuck!" Steve shouted, and then Emily shouted something similar. The hairy spider legs touching their skin were awful and disgusting. They managed to brush most of them off, then Steve ran to the switch to turn on the light. They now saw that the room was full of them, crawling on everything, even the ceiling. One fell straight into Steve's face as he was looking up. He brushed it off quickly. "Oh my God, what is happening?" "I don't know, but we have to get the kids and get the fuck out of here." Steve jumped to the door, opened it forcefully, and they both ran out. Outside their room, it was the same. Only when they reached the stairs, they saw the infestation didn't spread upward yet. Most of the spiders were on the lower part of the staircase. Steve led the way, and they reached the children's room in no time. The frantic parents startled both Jenny and Carl. "What's wrong? What happened?" "Jenny, we have to get out as soon as possible." But why? I'm scared," said Carl. "Don't worry, we'll get you out. There are lots of spiders downstairs, but we'll get out right now." "Daddy, you said the spiders were dead." "I know, son. Some of them survived. Now let's go." Emily picked up Carl because he was lighter. Steve picked up Jenny, and they rushed down the stairs. Both kids began to cry when they saw what was waiting downstairs. Their skin erupted in goosebumps, and their breathing became fast and shallow. The parents headed straight for the front door. Despite the large number of spiders there, they were determined to escape. Spiders or no spiders, they had to get out. When Steve opened the door, Emily screamed. Jenny and Carl did the same thing when they saw it. Steve just stared in disbelief for a few moments. The doorway was completely webbed with the dense spider silk. In the middle of it, there stood the largest spider they have ever seen. It was about 3 times the size of the one they faced on their first day at the house. Oh my God, Steve. What are we gonna do? I don't know. What the fuck? I have never seen. Please do something. Stop whining. Please, just stop it. You're not helping. Emily began to cry. The children too. Steve felt his anger and frustration rising. He looked around quickly to see if the windows were covered as well. They were. Hundreds of smaller spiders crawling all over the webs, weaved on the windows, the doorway. Oh my God, what are we gonna do? Dad, please get us out of here, cried Jenny. Steve put her down, but when her feet reached the floor, she cried in disgust. It was full of crawling small spiders. Do something, Steve. Shut up. It was your fucking idea to come here. Now look at this mess. I'm sorry. Fuck it. Steve then rushed to the living room and he came back with a wooden chair, and with no hesitation, he flung it straight at the spider in the middle of the doorway. The chair hit the web, which vibrated violently. They saw in horror that the spider was still on the web. It just moved up slightly. Several smaller spiders crawled onto the web after the vibrating faded. The chair remained stuck on the dense web. All right, asshole, I will show you. And then Steve rushed to the kitchen for a bag of insecticide. He found it, although it was hard to move between the thousands of spiders. He had to stop several times to brush them off. Steve also got a lighter, then rushed out again. He went close to the enormous spider with a can of insecticide in one hand and the lighter in the other. He flicked the lighter in front of the can and then sprayed. The roaring flame hit the spider dead on, but a smaller one jumped on Steve from above. His hands jerked to the side and the flame caught the curtain nearby. They began to purr. Steve wanted to put the flames out, but then more spiders attacked them. They most likely retaliated because he attacked the big one, and the giant spider fell down on the floor, then retreated. The hairs on its hideous body caught fire. Emily then had to choose between trying to save her husband or the house. Of course, she chose the former. He tried to free Steve from the spiders, which were now biting him. He screamed, cursed, and squirmed on the ground. In the meantime, flames were spreading. Thick smoke began to fill the house. The children were screaming and crying at the same time. They wanted desperately for the adults to save the day. The spiders, they began biting Emily too. She screamed in pain while trying to free Steve, who was already bleeding from several bites. Only the desperate cry of her children determined her to reconsider. Mom, they're attacking us, Mom. She now had to choose between Steve and the kids. There was no time to hesitate, so he turned to the kids, and with superhuman strength, fueled by adrenaline, he picked both of them up. With tears rolling down her cheeks, she ran toward the stairs. He didn't even notice the fire, which was already raging. It threatened to spread to the living room, and some thick smoke was already crawling on the ceiling. Steve screamed in pain, then went silent forever. Emily reached the stairs, where she had put the kids down. Her strength faded quickly. He ushered them up toward the upstairs bedroom. The spiders were still not present on the upper floor, but they were spreading. She burst into the bedroom and switched on the light, but when she got closer to the window, she saw it was webbed in too. The spiders were patrolling outside this window. Most likely, they sealed off every potential escape route. What should I do now? What should I do? What should I do? Then Carl shouted, "Mom, the attic!" What? We can escape through the attic. The big apple tree. Emily knew now what Carl wanted to say. The branches of the tree grew over the roof of the house. With a little luck, she could help them onto the branches. From there, they could climb down. Even she might be able to do it once, since she's small and agile. The kids helped her place the ladder under the attic's door. A good thing that Steve left it upstairs. They planned on working some more in the attic the next day. Smoke was already accumulating upstairs too. The fire was spreading with great speed, and they heard the crackling of burning furniture. They placed the ladder under the opening and climbed into the attic. Emily searched for the approximate location where the branches of the tree were right over the roof. She moved the shingles out of the way and poked her head out. There were no spiders on the roof as far as she could see. She forgot to take a flashlight with her, so she couldn't see too much detail. What was visible in the moonlight was enough, however. The branches were not far away. She helped Jenny up, then Carl. It was harder for her to get up, but she finally managed. They had to be very careful not to slip. A fall from this height would mean certain death. Emily extended her arm and grabbed the branch. It was not as thick as she wanted it to be, but there was no return now. He helped the kids up, then watched with a racing heart as they began their slow descent. Emily wanted to follow them, but a little later, she didn't want to risk breaking the branch. After the children were at a considerable distance, Emily tried her luck with the branch. It was a long time ago when she climbed trees, and she never did it at a dangerous height. She pulled herself up somehow, but then the branch began to sway. Emily struggled for a few seconds, but then slipped and fell back on the roof. The impact was hard enough to break the old woodwork, and she plunged back into the attic floor where she had lost consciousness. Jenny and Carl screamed and cried, but nothing heard their cries. Only night. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our chapter. Yo, what is up, everybody? Let's go back again. Another chapter from our new story. Remember these links in the description below. Show love to the author. Like, comment, and subscribe. They ate quickly and talked little. Jenny knew her parents were still mad at each other, she couldn't do much. She could only hope that they would sort it out. Carl was still sleeping, and Emily didn't bother him. He would eat after getting up. After lunch, Steve and Emily put their differences aside and headed toward the attic door. It was upstairs, close to the staircase. Steve brought up a shaky old ladder, prayed to God it would not crumble under him. Emily hoped the same and watched with a shivering spine as her husband tried to open the attic door. He imagined countless spiders falling on him from above, then beginning to attack him while he was squirming on the floor. She hated these thoughts, but they were automatic, just like when standing on the edge of a cliff and imagining for a second the fatal jump, or imagining pushing someone over the cliff. If there's anybody else there. The call of the void. She mused for a fraction of a second, but then woke from her daydreaming when Steve forced open the door. He pushed it slowly, squinting his eyes in case anything nasty fell on them from the attic. But nothing serious did, only dust. They both saw cobwebs and a thick dust tangled in them. No spider swarm, however, only a few small ones here and there. Alright, looks like it's clear. He then used his flashlight to take a quick look around, but saw nothing like he saw at the bottom of the well. What else do you see? Well, a lot of useless shit. More precisely. Alright, more precisely, lots of crates, boxes, rat droppings, old furniture, and a lot of dust. This is work for an army. Can I go up? Yeah, let me just go up first. After Steve climbed up into the attic, Emily followed. The ladder barely felt her small frame. It was like the wind had nuzzled it for a few seconds. It sure is a lot to do here. Yeah, but we have to be careful. No children up here. Alright. I agree with you on that one. Emily thought she would let Steve's well-side outburst slip if he remained disagreeable. They'd really had a rough time in their life, and arguing endlessly won't fix their relationship. Soon, they began to work on the attic. Carl was still sleeping, while Jenny stood below the attic door just in case something had to be brought down or something brought up, like tools or a glass of water. When they called it a day, Emily and Steve were exhausted. They inspired more dust than ever. Steve's lungs were stressed to the maximum in the thick dust which was floating around. With every move they made, the dirt stirred. Steve had quite a few coughing fits during his stay in the attic. Hey, do you still have some of that wine? Yes, of course, why? Gotta wash that dust down with something. Don't you want some too? Yeah, why not? Alright, I'll be right back with the bottle. Alright, thanks. Emily turned to go for the bottle. She smiled because it looked like things were falling back into their place once again. The wine felt incredible. Steve's throat burned as the liquid went straight down. He took quite a few gulps, soon felt a little dizzy. Emily was more ladylike. She poured herself half a glass, then savored it while preparing dinner. Jenny was helping her out too. Carl soon emerged from the bedroom, his eyes red. When his mother saw him, she knew right away that the boy had been crying for time. Emily looked at Steve, who understood right away what's the deal. He put down the pack of cigarettes from his hand. This can wait, he thought, then went to Carl. The boy's sad eyes stared at him questioningly. They were not asking why Steve came to him at that moment, but why he had to scream at him when he had almost fallen to his death inside the well. Even his immature mind realized that the grown-up's reaction was out of place, given the circumstances. Steve knelt before his son. Carl could smell the alcohol and stale cigarettes on his breath. But at his age, he was not yet repulsed by it. How you doing, buddy? I'm okay. Good, that's good. Look, I'm sorry for the way I shouted at you. I got angry because you almost fell into the well. I overreacted and I'm sorry for that. I was not helping, I know. Carl nodded and looked at his mother. Will you forgive your daddy, Carl? Yes, I forgive you, Dad. I'm sorry, Tuet. I shouldn't have gone to the well. It's okay. The important thing is that you're alright. But you have to learn from this, alright? Yes, but I saw something. I know. I've taken care of the well. I saw some spiders there and smoked them out. They will not be bothering us anymore. We still have to take care of the basement though, but I already have an idea for that. Are there spiders in the basement? I think there are, but only a few. But if you want, we can make sure there will be no more spiders coming out of there, alright? Alright. Can I help you? Of course you can. Just let your mother finish cooking. Steve, what are you up to? You'll see. Just finish what you're doing. Could you serve it in the living room, please? Yeah, sure. It's almost ready. Just give me a few more minutes. Steve took Carl out on the porch while the girls were serving spaghetti and meatballs in the living room. The aroma of oregano and basil combined with the smell of the cooked meat and tomato sauce were heavenly. They were all starving. Even Carl felt his hunger rising. Steve searched for his bag of tricks, which he brought back from the store. Fetched 2 cans of insecticide, gave one to Carl, and headed back with the bag in his hand. So, do you know how to use it? Yes, I know. Not that little anymore. Good. You are becoming a big boy, right? Yes, I'm a big boy. He was happy now that his father wasn't angry anymore. So they both went to the basement door. Steve took a broom and began brushing away cobwebs from the rotten door that covered it. How old is it, Daddy? I'm sorry? The house. How old is it? Steve stopped for a moment and scratched his stubby cheeks while trying to come up with an answer. Well, I think your mother knows more about the house than I do. But if I remember correctly, this part of the house is about 150 years old.
Wow.
Quite old, right?
Yes, how did it not crumble?
Because whenever people saw that it tried to crumble, they repaired it. Back in the old days, people repaired everything. They were skilled and capable.
Just like you, right, Dad?
I'm not that skilled. I can certainly repair things, but not like that. Those people were working hard all day long. They worked for themselves. I'm sitting at a desk all day making somebody else rich. The words came out automatically. He didn't think much when he uttered them, but after saying them, he realized how true they were. You work for somebody else's dreams. You don't have dreams of your own. This second thought came right after the first, but Carl's question didn't woke him up. The boy had to repeat it in order to register.
How is that?
You will understand one day, but you will have to grow for that. Alright, let's see what we have here. Steve knelt above the basement door, searched for an opening in the rotten wood, then sprayed insecticide. He then invited his son to do the same. While Carl tried his best to do exactly as his father, Steve quickly opened all the windows wide. They emptied 2 canisters of insecticide into the basement. After that, they went into the living room and closed the kitchen door. Emily and Jenny were already waiting for them at the table. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our chapter. Yo, what is up, everybody? Let's go back again. Another chapter from our new story. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author. Like, comment, and subscribe. Steve went to the kitchen and lit another cigarette. The clock didn't strike noon yet, but he already puffed on quite a few. Emily returned from the master bedroom, where Carl was already half asleep. Steve saw she was upset.
What was that all about?
What are you talking about?
You know very well what I'm talking about. Why did you have to attack him like that?
Attack him? He almost died, Emily. You realize that?
Yes, I realize that. I'm not stupid. You have to realize as well that he's just a child.
It's precisely why you don't leave him alone.
Come on, Steve. Who would have thought that he would go into the well? I told him to put the grate down and come back.
You said it yourself. He's a child. He can't think for himself.
Yeah, but I can't stay near him all the time, 24 hours a day.
He was right there beside you, and you sent him out. It's worse than not being near him.
You're such an asshole.
I might be, but don't forget, it was your goddamn idea to come to this shithole. Congrats, you almost killed our son.
Look, I'm not listening to this anymore.
Emily stood up, then bolted out. Steve dragged on one last smoke and slammed the half-burned cigarette into the ashtray. He plans to search the other rooms for the source of the spider infestation. Steve wanted to eradicate them in order to continue with the work in the yard.
The bags with the insecticides and the traps were still outside, so he stood up to fetch them. His eyes fell on the basement door, which was still covered in webs. Nobody had touched it yet. I'll be damned if I go down there, he murmured. Fucking spiders, fucking rats, fucking everything. First, he made a tour through the house, placing traps for the rats and the mice together with some poison grains. He also searched every corner of the rooms, which had been cleaned by Emily and Jenny, to see if there were any signs of spider layers in them. But he found nothing. It was weird, he thought. Those spiders must have come from somewhere. The basement door came to his mind, but he dismissed it. There was no way those spiders come from out the basement just to go all the way upstairs to crawl over Carl. It just made no sense. Spiders are not sentient, he thought. They live by the rule of the 4 F's. Feed, fight, flee, and mate. After a thorough search of the house and the active evasion of his wife, Steve sat down on an old creaking chair on the porch. He looked to his right toward the backyard and noticed the well, which almost took the life of his son. Or maybe it would have been Emily, not the well. The well is not responsible for anything. It can't be. If someone falls in and dies, tough luck. Steve remembered that Carl said he had saw something down there. Now his own curiosity kicked in, and he decided to check it out. He just had to fetch a flashlight. In a few minutes, he was back with flashlight and leaned over the well. But before switching on the flashlight, he noticed a faint smell he couldn't recognize. It was not particularly awful, but it definitely wasn't pleasant either. It was something he could not identify, a completely alien odor. Whatever, he thought, and switched on the light. He almost drew back when he saw what was down there. Believing his eyes was hard at this point. Defying any logic and law of nature, a swarm of countless spiders of all sizes had made the well their home. The hairs on Steve's back stood up, and the shivers crisscrossed his spine. Water was no longer present at the well's bottom, only the crawlers. From as small as half an inch to as big as several inches, there were spiders of all shapes and sizes down there. Steve drew back in horror and disbelief. He briefly imagined what would have happened if Carl fell into the well. All broken and hurt, with a swarm of spiders crawling on him as he drew his last breath. He closed his eyes and shook his head. Instead, he forced himself to think about what to do with them. The exterminators were busy, and he sure as hell wouldn't sleep one more night knowing these things were around. Looking up at the house, he saw Emily stepping up onto something in order to begin washing a large window in one of the upstairs bedrooms. The thick branches of the old apple tree partially covered her, but her face was visible. He's still upset, thought Steve. But it doesn't matter now. She'll get over it. He began waving to her. He pretended she didn't see. But after Steve's frantic insistence, she looked at him, and Steve gestured for her to come down. Emily furrowed her eyebrows when she saw Steve's gestures. She spoke briefly to Jenny, probably telling her to stay there, then headed down. He found Steve staring at the well, with the cigarette dangling loosely between his fingers. It looked like it would fall to the ground at any time. What's wrong? Come on, look at this. Steve put the cancer stick in his mouth, then signaled Emily to go with him closer to the well. She did. It didn't take long for her to recoil after Steve pointed the light to the bottom. Oh my God, what the hell is that? A goddamn infestation, that's what it is. But how? I have no idea. It's not normal. Look, I'm no biologist, but I can tell you with a reasonable amount of certainty that whatever is down there is not fucking normal. Just like the big ass spider I killed in the bushes. So, what are you gonna do? I will light those fuckers up. Throw in a Molotov or something. I will not go to bed knowing these things are crawling out there. Yeah, sounds like a good idea. Hey, have you been in the attic yet? No, why? We have to check the attic to see what surprises it has for us. Basement as well. My God, are you telling me that these things are in there too? Well, more likely in the basement than the attic, but we have to check. Look, I'll smoke this bunch out, then we go to the attic. We have plenty of insecticides, and if we need more, I'll go and buy up the whole goddamn store if I have to. That being said, Emily went back upstairs. She still felt the goosebumps on her skin whenever the image of the crawling mess of spiders came to mind. Steve didn't hesitate much. He searched for a big glass bottle and a plastic hose. The plan was to suck out the gasoline from the car, mix it with some cooking oil in the bottle, and then stuff the bottle's neck with a gas-drenched rag. It was simple, yet effective solution. After finishing his Molotov cocktail, he held it up in front of him. A golden mixture of oil and gasoline glittered in the sunlight. Not exactly the favorite champagne of tankeroos, but then went straight to the well. He held it up above the well's mouth, then lit the rag. It caught flame in an instant, and Steve immediately threw it in. He didn't want to risk getting caught on fire. Steve threw the bottle at an oblique angle, so it hit the wall's rocky wall, and not the dirt at the bottom. It hit the wall roughly where Steve wanted it to, and the fire roared to life inside the well. Black smoke arose from the hole, bringing with it the smell of gas fumes. Steve watched with delight as the spiders were engulfed in flames and smoke. Many tried to flee, but the heat rose far too quickly. They succumbed to the inferno. He felt something strange beneath his feet. It might have been a slight tremor, but it was faint. He might have also just imagined it, so he dismissed it right away. Emily watched from the upstairs window as the smoke was drifting up from the well. He then planned to finish it up. It was already past noon, and they had something to eat. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our chapter. Yo, what is up, everybody? Ceresco back again. Another chapter from our new story. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to the author. Like, comment, and subscribe. Early in the morning, Steve and Emily were drinking their coffee. They let the kids sleep in, and Emily went to check on them from time to time, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. What are we gonna do about the spiders, Steve? The man fumbled for another cigarette, placed it in his mouth like countless other times, and lit it. Emily stared at him while he dragged from it, and saw that he was thinking. I'm probably just gonna call it exterminator. We needed those guys anyway, but I thought that we'll get the entire house cleaned beforehand. Doesn't matter, just call them. I don't know if there are any exterminators in Belhurst, but we must find something. Don't worry, I'll find something. Alright, you do that, and I'll fix us something to eat. She went to her husband, kissed his cheek, and paced to the fridge to see to make for dinner. Eggs, she thought, after opening the fridge. A large omelet with bacon, perfect for an early heart attack. The poor quality of her sleep demanded calories, and also the housework could burn a shit ton of energy. She had to fuel up. Steve took out his cell phone and searched the internet for pets exterminators in Belhurst. Town being small, he didn't expect to find much. There were 2 companies listed on the web for Belhurst. One of them was closed a few years ago because of some illegal activities. Steve tried calling the other one, hoped for the best. A young woman picked up the phone. She talked to Steve briefly in a composed voice. She explained that their exterminators are a bit overburdened because of the high workload. They can get to their house in a few days. It didn't matter how much money Steve offered. The young lady politely turned the offers down. We'll do our best, Mr. Jenkins, and we'll get to you as soon as possible. I already entered your name and address in our system, and we'll send the team there when they'll be free. Steve thanked her, then slammed on the phone to the table. What are you gonna do then? Just let me think, alright? Alright, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be annoying, I just want to know that the kids are safe. I know, it's okay. I think I'll have to go into town, maybe buy some insecticides, also some traps. I really don't see any other option right now. Other towns too far away. I don't think they will come all the way to goddamn Belhurst. Better than nothing, right? It's way better. Look, I'll go right after breakfast. And after that, I still have a lot to do in the backyard. Soon, Emily finished preparing breakfast. They both ate, then Steve stood up. He searched for cigarettes, even though he didn't want to light one. Then saw Jenny and Carl enter the kitchen, sleepy eyes. Steve kissed the kids and his wife. He then headed out to the car. The town was not far, a little short of 3 miles from the house. This should be a quick drive, he thought. The only problem was that he hadn't been in town for a long time. Nevertheless, he was confident that he'll find a store soon enough. Emily gave some omelet to Jenny and Carl, but neither of them were particularly hungry. They both left a considerable amount of food on their plate. She then resumed her work, not bothering the kids because of their troubled sleep. But they joined her anyway soon. Slowly but surely, they began helping their mother. Emily and Jenny began the cleaning process. Carl's job was to take things out into the yard, things which were either considered for throwing away or they needed to be cleaned separately or put elsewhere. Carl took a small box of books from his mother's hands and carried them onto the porch. There, he paused a little. He was not a particularly strong boy, and the carrying of the box made his chest heave. The cool air outside felt good for his burning lungs. After he was panting on the porch, Carl noticed the well in the back. Something seemed to move on its stone rim. He wasn't sure about it, so he decided to check it out. Of course, he knew it was a bad idea. While he was walking toward the well, his mother's educating voice resonated through his mind. Don't go too close to the well, because if you fall in, it cannot get you out. Anyway, curiosity always wins, and it did this time. He approached the well's rim and saw that it was about as tall as himself. Carl put his hands on the cold, mossy stone and hoisted himself up. Shadows danced on the rugged wall of the well, so he couldn't see far down. He kept looking for a glimpse of reflection on water, but there was none. He only saw the shadows dancing, and then realized that they were not shadows. They were moving. Emily noticed that Carl had not come back, and she became worried. She put down the broom and headed out with definite steps. When she reached the porch, she looked to the right and saw Carl on the edge of the well, trying to lean over more in order to see something. "Oh my God, Carl!" she shouted, but was already running toward the well. Carl looked at her with a startled face, then lost his balance. He began tilting forward, with his head leaning toward the darkness of the well. In a desperate reflex, he dug his knees into the side of the well and also put his hand on the inner wall. It was not enough to hold him back, but it was enough to slow him down so that his mother could grab him. Emily reached him at the last fraction of a second. He grabbed his clothes with both hands and pulled them back while screaming like a banshee. Steve stopped in front of the gate and heard the scream. He jumped out of the car and ran straight to the well, where he found Emily holding Carl tight in her arms. They were both sitting on the ground near the well. A frightened Jenny just ran out the house, not understanding what happened. What's going on? What happened? Asked Steve. He almost fell into the well. Oh, God. Emily hugged him tighter. The realization of how easily one can lose somebody just hit her. Carl was too scared. He had a hard time breathing. I'm sorry, Mommy. I'm sorry, Daddy, but I saw something down there. Saw what? What the hell can be inside a well other than water? Steve felt his anger rising, and controlling it was hard. Carl began to cry. Don't you come near this well alone anymore, understood? Carl didn't answer. He cried even louder than before. Understood. Steve tried again, but Carl couldn't answer. Leave him. It's enough for him, okay? We'll sort it out later, shouted Emily. Ah, what a wonderful day. God damn it. Steve said no more. He proceeded to the car in order to unpack what he brought from the store. Emily took Carl inside, and she let him stay in bed for the rest of the day. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our chapter. Yo, what is up, everybody? Let's go back again to another chapter from our new story. Remember to use the links in the description below. Show love to them. Like, comment, and subscribe. By nightfall, Emily and Jenny could clean the master bedroom and one smaller bedroom upstairs. They also finished the bathroom, more or less. There was still work to do there, but that could wait. Steve also changed the faulty faucet and replaced the shower arm and head. Other than that, things are working fine. Emily took some time to cook a quick dinner. The stove was working well, so she couldn't resist the temptation to exploit it. When they were eating, he looked at Steve and he uttered a faint smile. This made Emily happy, a sign that things are going to work out. It was a welcome gesture, however faint. After dinner, the parents took the children to the bedroom upstairs, and they made sure that the kids were comfortable before heading back down. Steve sat on the bedside and lit a cigarette, as usual. Emily said that she had an idea, then left so he had time to smoke. He was facing the window, opposite to the door. When she came back, he did not move. Steve just listened to her light footsteps coming closer. The room was lit only by a bedside lamp. Light was faint, but felt comforting. The day of hard work was over, and he felt it in his bones, muscles. Every part of his body was hurting. Steve, not used to this kind of work. Emily crawled into the bed and put her arms around Steve. He kissed his cheek, and he suspected what was coming. Look what I found. Oh, where did you find that? I remembered that Mother was keeping a few bottles for special occasions. So this is a special occasion then? Yes, it is. Don't you think the same? New beginnings are always special occasions. Yes, I think so. Look, I know what I did was wrong. I know that you still hate me.
Emily, don't.
No, I feel it. Also, I see it in your eyes and your face. Look, we've talked about this. Sorry for everything. But I feel rejected. I felt that you didn't want me anymore.
Alright. Look, I forgave you, but it's still hard to, accept this.
I know. You work so much. I was almost always alone. Not really alone. I've been with the kids, but not with you. You know, they too need you. That's why we came here. To make things right. To reunite.
Steve smiled again. This time, it was more pronounced. He took the bottle from Emily, and she also handed him the opener, which was in her pocket. The man opened the bottle and poured wine for both of them. They toasted, then drank. Felt good.
It's been some time since we had, our own time together.
He looked at her and began to feel what he didn't feel for some time. Emily's face was a little worn, but still beautiful. After giving birth to 2 kids, she was still a woman who many men would have found attractive. Steve felt the heat rising. After all this time that he despised her for what she had done, he realized that he still wanted her. Emily was a delicate woman and a wonderful mother. It was now that he knew for sure that her affair mainly happened because of him.
So, this is a new beginning, right?
He then kissed her right away. She welcomed this kiss, and the butterflies in her stomach came to life again. Emily returned the kiss, and then it felt like teenagers all over again. The kids had a hard time falling asleep. The image from the spider from the backyard tormented Carl. He kept standing up in his bed, looking around. The bedside lamp was switched on, and he wouldn't let Jenny turn it off.
Go to sleep, Carl. There was only one spider. Don't worry, there are no spiders in here.
How do you know that?
If there was one, there could be more, right? No, it's wrong. Look, Dad said that he saw no more big spiders, so calm down. Did you see any other huge spider? No, I didn't, but what about the webs in the house and the basement door? They are normal. Spiders always inhabit abandoned places. Inhabit? What is that? It means that they like abandoned places. Even places which are not abandoned. Maybe there are a few spiders left in here. Oh no, I hope not.
Don't worry, I was just joking with you.
Besides, what is wrong with you now? The afternoon you seemed alright.
I think I'm hearing rustling again, Jenny.
What? I don't hear anything. Look, just listen.
Jenny listened for many seconds. But there was nothing her ears could pick up. She was only hearing crickets outside.
I can't hear anything, Carl. Look, there's nothing in here. I'll go to sleep.
After some time,
they fell asleep. They were both tired, but Carl was scared. His sleep was a shallow one, while Jenny drifted quickly to the dream world. Carl woke up not too long after he fell asleep. The rustling was there again. He stood up in his bed, then turned to Jenny. He was fast asleep. The strange shadow passed on the floor. He looked to the window, but saw only the branches of a gigantic tree moving in the wind. He waited for a few minutes, then lay back down. The intensity of the rustling decreased, so Carl fell asleep again. The next time he would wake up, however, Steve and Emily were already sleeping in each other's arms when Carl's screams woke them up. Instinctively, they both jumped out of bed and ran toward the door. Steve was only wearing his underwear. Emily was naked, so she grabbed her bathrobe with a quick move and put it on. They ran upstairs. Steve burst into the child's room like any Russian would have done in World War II. He switched on the light and saw his hysteric son in the middle of his bed, trying to get rid of the spiders which were crawling on his body. They were only about 1.5, maybe 2 inches long, legs considered. Jenny was screaming too, backed up against the wall with her legs on her pillow. She had some spiders on her too, and the parents quickly ran to help their children. Soon enough, the spiders were squished under their slippers. Hey, it's all right, it's all right, said Emily as she hugged Carl. Jenny joined them too, while Steve searched the room for more intruders. He was armed with only a slipper, which proved to be extremely effective at exterminating spiders. It was already slimy from the guts, with a few spiders Steve killed. It was crawling on my face. Emily just tried to hush him. Her heart was pounding, and she struggled to maintain her composure. She followed with her eyes the corporate keyboard warrior turned spider hunter and hoped that he will take care of them. In other circumstances, she might have found her husband funny, but not now, not when the children were scared out of their minds. Alright, it's all clear, said Steve, after combing the room. He was far from being sure if it was truly clear or not, but he had to reassure his wife and kids. Steve sat near them on the bedside and hugged them. With the kids getting calmer, Emily felt better. Even though this house had some surprises, she thought, at least we were getting back together again. Want to sleep in our room? Emily asked, and looked at Steve, but without the children observing. Steve nodded approvingly, and the kids agreed with great delight. They don't have to spend the night in this room anymore. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our chapter. Yo, what's up, everybody? Let's go back again. Another chapter from our new story. Remember to use the links below to show love to the author. Like, comment, subscribe. The next day, they woke up early. Even the kids got up earlier than usual. The place was still unfamiliar, and they needed time to get accustomed to it. Steve's head was heavy. He felt like after a serious case of bottle sickness. This was his own version of a hangover. Emily got up and made coffee. She also prepared a quick dinner for the brunch. There was nothing really to prepare, because their dinner comprised cold food straight out of the packs, almighty Walmart. The kitchen looked much more neatly in the rays of the morning sun, but the rest of the house still needed an enormous amount of work. Steve lit a second cigarette and offered one to his wife too. It was an instinctive move, like searching for the pack in his pocket every 10 minutes or so. Emily wasn't an avid smoker, but sometimes she enjoyed a few puffs. So, how did you two sleep? Not so well, Mom. Well, this place is still foreign. You'll get used to it. Mom, something was crawling around. I heard it for a long time. Crawling around? I heard nothing. Yeah, it was more like rustling. I saw nothing, but I heard it. This house is creeping me out. Maybe it's haunted, said Carl. Hey, Carl, don't scare your sister. Look, everyone. Rats made those sounds. Or maybe mice. Look, I'll place some traps around the house soon enough. Alright, sounds good. Alright, let's go. Time to work. I'll come with you, Dad. Alright, come on, you little explorer. Let's see what's out in that jungle. Emily watched with delight as her husband took their son out. The boy was happier than ever. Jenny, honey, we have to finish up the living room and the bathroom, then we'll see the rest. All right, Mom. Steve and Carl began working on the dense shrubbery in the yard. It proved hard work, but Carl seemed to enjoy it. Steve was not so enthusiastic. His mind was more at his job. It took Emily a lot of convincing in order to make Steve take some time off. He eventually succeeded. He glanced out the window and smiled, saw them working. After some time, Emily noticed that Jenny's weariness was fading. They were talking a lot, and the girl mentioned to her mother a boy from school. With reddening cheeks, she admitted she liked him. Emily smiled again, then caressed her daughter's long blonde hair. Steve and Carl made their way toward the back of the house. An old well was visible, the dense vegetation. It had been made with stone, and a fragile wooden roof was above it. To the right, behind the house, Carl noticed a large tree. Look, Dad, what tree is that? I don't know. I think it's an old apple tree. Last time I was here, it was much smaller. It has branches over the roof. Can we climb up that? No, certainly not, Your mother would kill me if I'd ever let you up there. But maybe can you climb it? Maybe I can. The ladder, of course. Not that young anymore. Alright, come on, let's take a break. After a slight break, they went back out. Steve lit another cigarette, then began thinking about the next step. While he was looking around and thinking, Carl screamed. Steve woke up from his daydreaming, then looked around to see what happened. Carl was running to him from not too far away. Dad, there's a giant spider out there. Emily and Jenny hurried out from the house. They saw Steve and Carl standing outside. What's wrong? What happened? Asked Emily. There's a spider in the bushes. It's huge. Don't worry, son. I'll check it out. The others followed closely behind them. Their initial scare faded, and now they were curious to see the giant spider. Steve reached the place in a few quick steps. The cigarette, which was dangling in his mouth, fell out when he saw it. He first thought that Carl had been overreacting, but he was wrong. The thing just stood there in the middle of a giant web. It was about as big as a grown man's open palm, black and ugly. Shivers ran down Steve's back when he saw the spider. The girls screamed when they saw the creature. Its rugged back and hairy legs made them repulse in horror. The web was big too, the biggest they'd ever seen. It looked like it had at least 5 feet in diameter. It also seemed pretty strong. What the hell is that? Obviously it's a spider, but that big? Yeah, I don't know, Mom. Where did it come from? Yeah, good question. A spider like this is not supposed to exist here. This is the northern part of the United States, not Australia or the Amazon jungle. I don't know, Dad. Maybe it escaped from a zoo or something. Maybe, but I don't think there are any zoos anywhere near Bellhurst. I think that it's just freak mutation. Somehow this one got bigger than the others. I don't know. Well, will you get rid of it, Steve? Yeah, babe, of course. Just let me check how the hell to kill it. I want to make sure it doesn't have any big brothers around, you know? Alright, just please kill it. It's the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Then Emily took Jenny by the hand and they headed back into the house. Steve looked around and his eyes fell upon the spade he used to dig out the roots of all the small trees and the bushes in the yard. It had a long enough handle so Steve didn't have to get too close to the spider. How will you kill it, Daddy? Well, I'll hit it with the spade. Hope it doesn't run away. Steve took the spade and approached the creature. He looked around several times to make sure that there were no more spiders around. There were none. Only a dead rat in the grass. Carl watched with great interest as his father closed in on the monster, spade in hand. Not exactly the stereotype of a medieval knight fighting a dragon. He was more like the stereotype of the modern day cooperation employee. A seat-shining workaholic with a smoking problem, severe muscle atrophy, a growing gut, and declining testosterone levels. He raised the spade, but his first hit missed, Spider by an inch or so. Steve's coordination had known better times, and the spider curled up when the web vibrated. One more hit, and the beast fell into the grass. Steve searched for it, saw the spider was using vegetation to hide and get away, but its blackness gave its position away. Steve struck again, and the edge of the spade cut the creature in half. The front half was crawling on, but the other hit crushed it. Carl came closer and stood near Steve, who was inspecting the creature. More skeletons of mice and rats lay scattered around the place. It was obvious that the thing had been feeding on them. Yuck, that's disgusting. Yeah, good that it's dead. I hope this is the only one, Dad. Yeah, me too. Steve didn't look around and lit another cigarette. Went back to the porch. Carl followed him, and they both sat down on the steps. The man was wondering what else was waiting for them at this house. That, ladies and gentlemen, the end of our chapter. Yo, what is up, everybody? It's your boy Ceresco, back again with another short horror story for you guys. This one is titled The Strange Occurrence of Bellhurst, written by Old School Horror. Remember to use the links in the description. Show love to the author. Like, comment, and subscribe. The overcast sky was foreshadowing the mood of the upcoming days. Steve Jenkins stopped the car near the big iron gate of the house. He looked out the right window, past his wife, and saw the small town of Bellhurst. It was as gloomy as the house and the weather, and just as annoying as Emily, thought Steve. He then lit a cigarette. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, sighed, then got out the car.